Kineme. Okay, so, alright, girl. Okay. Ethylene kineme. Alright. Current bitrate is... Okay naman ah. Mark, anong pinagsasabi mo, Mark? Thank you. Thank you, McKay. Okay
Ganyan pala
naman,
po.
Mark. Lumabas na, Mark. Lumabas na dito
Tama.
sabay ano ko eh. Sa cellphone kong maliit eh. Ikaw talaga, Mark. Mark, ha? Ano na
Okay na
bang...
po.
Ano na ba? Ano ba ang... Ano ba yan, ha? Alright. Nasaan ang anak ko? Yung anak kong bading. Nasaan na yung anak ko? Bakit wala siya? Absent siya? Nako.
Mukhang wala po.
Naku, sasampalin ko yung anak kong bading na yun. Alright, so anyway, let's move on to our, the real reason why we're here. We're going to talk about infection control, and this is going to be the end of my introduction to microbiology. Sir, pinag-uusapan natin, introduction lang yun. Oo, marami pa tayong pag-uusapan. Gram-positive, gram-negative cocci, gram-negative bacilli, gram-positive bacilli, aerobes, and then we have anaerobes pa. And then we're going to talk about, if we have time, we're going to talk about not Ehrlichia, chlamydia species, as well as the spirochetes. And then we're going to move on with automation and other stuff that might be important for your exams. Okay? So, introduction, malapit na tayong matapos sa introduction. Hold on lang, okay? Hold on lang. Madami talaga ang micro, guys, ha? Kasi major siya eh. You know, major. Alright? So, we'll start with the most simplest of all questions related to infection control, the differentiation between sterilization and disinfection, or what we call asepsis. Okay? So, what is the difference between sterilization and disinfection? Sige nga, people from you can type in. Sorry. Oh, Nigel already. All right, girl. Okay. What's the difference?
For disinfection po, hindi po lahat ng microorganisms ay namamatay. Pag sa
Mm-hmm.
sterilization naman, all,
Mm-hmm.
including yung spores.
Okay. So I'll give you an example of some you might be asked this question, so that's the reason why I started with this particular question. All right. So who here would I want to see in the chat box, is hand washing a form of a form of sorry, hand washing, so it means by soap, not hand rub, ha. Hand rub is different. Hand rub is with an alcohol swab similar to this. But sorry, alcohol similar to this. Hang on a sec. I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with this guy. Oh, you pew, 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 like that. Okay, so this is that's what you do when you want to do a hand rub. Okay, you use an alcoholic solution to clean out your hands. Okay, so hand washing is more or less the 60-second procedure that you guys have learned throughout your whole lives, as I think whole lives during the pandemic. So what is it? Is it a form of hand washing is a for sorry is hand washing a form of disinfection or sterilization? All right, so that is a question for us in the chat room. I need to see your answers later on. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Yeah, Nigel is correct. Thank you so much for answering that particular question. Now, I want you guys to answer that one as we have our discussion. In slide 171, we'll go back to your answers. Okay? So, sterilization is complete destruction of all microbial life, similar to what Nigel said. Okay? Disinfection is destruction of
Bakit?
pathologic microbial life. All right? Yes, Mark. Is there anything?
Wala po.
Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry. I thought you were saying something to me. All right.
Sorry din po.
Okay. Now, what are the three general methods of physical sterilization? So we talked about sterilization. Nabubulol si sir. We talked about the sterilization or the complete destruction of microbial life. So we have to talk about the types of sterilization methodologies. So there are three general methodologies when it comes to physical sterilization. All right. So you have to remember that there is what you call heating, ionizing radiation, and filtration. All right. Most of the time in the clinical laboratory, what you're going to focus on is, of course, heating. Now, ionizing radiation, if you're going to work in large hospitals, you might encounter ionizing radiation. I suppose in the OR, your job there is to we have med techs also in my previous hospital. It's a very large hospital. What they do is they put in a blue lamp, and everybody is forbidden to enter that particular corridor or particular part of the operating theater, and the light that comes out is actually an ionizing form of radiation. But it's light only, and that's used to clean or to sterilize rather the surfaces of the operating room. Okay, so or they call it here the operating theater. Okay, because there are interns that watch the operations as well. So if you're familiar with Grey's Anatomy, the reason why they call it a theater is because when people are looking there, oh my God, Dr. Grey, what are you doing? Why did you leave your forceps in the patient's ovaries and then closed it up? Mga ganong keme. Charot. So ganon. So yun yung operating theater. So they use ionizing radiation there. Filtration, not so much. This is more or less for food grade sterilization of consumables. So we don't we will probably brush up on the last two, and we're going to talk mostly about heating. Okay. So heating is most commonly done in the clinical laboratory. All right. So let's talk about heating some more. The types of heat sterilization techniques require two things. You have dry heat and of course moist heat. Okay. So obviously the difference is that there is a source of moisture for the first one, and the latter one is more or less just physically heating something. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit more. Okay, so moist heat sterilization techniques is divided into two different techniques. That again, these are things. There might be other forms of sterilization techniques, but for clinical microbiology, this is what you're going to encounter in your exams as well as in actual practice. Okay, so autoclaving is the most effective. All right, fractionization is again a different one. It's more or less for food microbiology. So there's several types of microbiology disciplines in practice. By the way, what you guys will be entering as you graduate. Hopefully, you guys graduate na. Okay, so if I see you guys again, I don't want to see you guys again. The next time I see you guys would probably be as colleagues. We'll consider ourselves as colleagues. Okay, all right. So when you guys pass, most of the things that you're going to do is autoclaving. Okay? I think in Capitol they have that in the third floor. You'll see a silver barrel with a valve. I'm not sure. I've been there last year. Okay, I think 2021. I know this year I've been there. I saw the autoclave there. It's a silver barrel. If you haven't operated it, you gotta be careful because you have to release the pressure first before actually opening it. Otherwise, you're going to burn yourself or somebody beside you. Okay, so be careful with the autoclave, by the way. So so for moist heat, most of the time you're going to be asked questions about autoclaving. Okay, but fractionization is something that is important, is of equal importance if you're going to enter the practice of food microbiology, which is very rare for us because majority of the organisms that we're going to talk about is primarily related to human diseases. Okay, so yeah. All right, so this is 173 is something that you need to remember. I need you to write it in your papers. This is one of the most important ones. This is a recall question. Time and time again, examiners have been asking this to med tech students for I think for ever since the practice has started or they've been conducting board exams. And you have to remember these numbers, okay? I need you guys to remember these numbers. So what are these numbers? 121 degrees, 51 psi for 15 minutes. What is the temperature? 121 degrees. What is the pressure? 51 psi. And ideally, The time for this is about 15 minutes. Okay? And we use a biological indicator, which means these are live organisms that will tell you that the autoclaving that you've done is actually effective. So it's actually the organism that I'm talking about is of course Bacillus stearothermophilus. Okay, this comes in the form of a liquid. It could come in the form of a liquid, but the most common that you're going to encounter is the autoclave tape. Okay, so I think you guys have seen the autoclave tape, but for the liquid version of Bacillus stearothermophilus, it's usually coming in a size in a AAA battery like this. So it's a small vial that you add into your autoclaves, and it will change color if the spores are broken down, reacting with the chemical and turning it from some manufacturers they have it in blue, some manufacturers it's in purple. So it depends on the manufacturer, but in essence it will change the clear fluid because there is destruction of the spores. And what is the content of the spores, by the way? Calcium dipylocholinate. You guys forgot already. Guys. Come on, guys. You guys already forgot. All right. So please don't forget those
Sir,
things. All
sir,
right.
sir.
Yes.
Sir. Ako to. Baka hindi mo lang na-recognize.
Yeah.
It's my new voice.
Welcome to adolescence. All right.
Slightly dying. Is it 51 or 15 PSI?
15 PSI. Sorry, 15. Oh my gosh. Sorry. 15. I was still young. Sorry, 15. Huwag niyo kakalimutan. Sorry. Nabaliktad siya. 15 dapat. 15 minutes, 15 PSI. Sorry. Hindi pala na-correct ng secretary ko. Sorry. Isa pala yan sa ano. Last year din ata, Sir Marco. Yan din ata yung inano mo, no?
Oo. Nabanggit ko rin nga ata.
15. Alright. So guys, it's 15. Okay? 15. Hindi pa pala na-correct ng ano ko. Alright? So yeah. Okay? So Bacillus stearothermophilus. It's not 51, it's 15. Okay? 15. Ako naman binasa ko din kanina. 'Di ba? Alright. So now, we're going to move on with fractional sterilization. Again, this is something that you may encounter in the exams, or you may not encounter it, but it's nice to know. Okay, so this one is something that you need to be much more familiar with. Okay, so please write it in your papers. 121, 15 psi for 15 minutes. So it's easy to remember. 15, 121. Di ba? Madali lang maalala. Wag niyo kakalimutan. And the organism is Bacillus stearothermophilus. Now we have other microorganisms that we can use, but this is the most commonly seen throughout I think books. I've seen Baylis and Scott's and Clinical Microbiology for Dummies. They have it also here. They also stated here. But we'll talk about the other biological indicators later. All right. Now, there are two types of fractional sterilization techniques. We have tyndalization and, of course, inspisation. Okay. So the difference is that this is done at a lower temperature. Okay. It's done at a lower temperature and it's done at several intervals. So tyndalization is done 100 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes, 3 consecutive days. Okay? That's the reason why it's known as intermittent sterilization. Inspisation is a little bit different. It's 75 to 85 degrees Celsius for 2 hours and for 3 consecutive days. So what do you need to remember? Inspisation. Okay? Inspisation. I think I've seen this in milk microbiology when they want to sterilize bottles for Brucella or the Bang Bacillus blood culture bottles. One of the instructions to sterilize it is use via inspisation. Okay? Because they have milk inside it. And also, I think this is the most common one that you're going to see for food grade sterilized milk. Okay? So inspisation is the most commonly used for industrial and of course clinical microbiology. All right, now we have three methods for heat sterilization or dry heat sterilization. So direct flame or direct heating. Okay, we also have oven heating, and lastly is of course incineration. Okay, differentiate the different. We need to differentiate each based on temperature variations. So for open flame or direct flame heating, that's what you use in most of your experiments, I suppose. I'm not sure. Mr. Marco, Sir Marco can give me a little bit of light, can shed a little bit of light on it. You can type it on the chat box if that is what if you guys are still using Bunsen burners. Okay? Because yeah. So yes, naka-open flame pa din kayo. All right. So you guys are still using open flame, using Bunsen burners, or if you have the one that is connected to gas, that's also viable for dry heat sterilization. All right. Another one is oven. Sorry, the temperature variation for direct flame is dependent on, of course, the atmospheric temperature. So there is no need for us to remember the temperature for that one. For oven, it's around 160 to 180 degrees ideally. Okay, and the time it takes for you to completely sterilize something is at around 120 one and a half to 2 hours. Okay, one and one half hours to 2 hours. Okay, for incineration, the temperature is sweltering. Sorry, not a sweltering. It's smoldering hot, 870 to 980 degrees Celsius, and this has been banned in many institutions, especially in the Philippines. We opt for sterilization. I think Clean Air Act banned the usage of incinerators. If you're familiar with your Clean Air Act, medtech laws, incineration has been banned. I think by the end of the Marcos regime, somewhere around 1987 or 1967 or 65. I'm not entirely sure. I might have mixed up the dates, but this is banned in the Philippines. There are some countries like here in Saudi Arabia where there are some incinerators still in many hospitals, but the Ministry of Health here uh, advises these machines to be out to be made obsolete. Okay, so let's move on to biological indicators as for QC and QA, for quality control and quality assurance of the oven. Okay, for QC and QA. So for QC and QA of ovens, you need to use Bacillus subtilis var Niger. Okay, var Niger. Okay, Bacillus subtilis var Niger. For autoclaves, what do we use again? I just mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. Sige nga. Sige nga, I just kept for autoclaves, what do we use? James Paul. James Paul, did my secretary send your price? I'm not sure. Can you please
Di pa po.
confirm? Hindi pa. All right, I'll notify her
Opo.
later. Okay. What's the microorganism that we use as a biological indicator for sterilizing your equipment or your media for in autoclaves?
Bacillus thermophilus
All right, wonderful.
po.
All right. Thank you so much. You still remember. Very good. Okay. Next. So for ovens, we use Bacillus subtilis var Niger. Okay? Why? Because it's a little bit higher. The oven is a little bit higher. Okay? We want to make sure that the temperature is enough to destroy the spores of Bacillus subtilis var Niger. Okay, now chemicals. So we're going to move on to chemical sterilization. Of course, you need to use the following chemicals: ethylene oxide, vapors. Okay, we can use vapors such as formaldehyde and hydrogen peroxide, glutaraldehyde, and peracetic acid. Majority of these things you will not encounter this in the clinical laboratory unless you are working in a mycobacteriology laboratory, because there they use vapors of hydrogen peroxide. Among these things, the safest would probably be hydrogen peroxide vapors. It is still deadly, okay? It's still deadly, but among all of these things, this one is less. This one has a lower safety safety precaution for it. So I think this one is flammable. I think ethylene oxide is flammable and it can cause irritation. Formaldehyde is of course cancerous and flammable, and similar to glutaraldehyde, and peracetic acid is much more irritating than hydrogen peroxide. So if there is something that you need to remember, if they ask you a question, which among the following has the lowest safety precaution, please select hydrogen peroxide. Okay, because that's one of the questions that I remember that I remember being asked in terms of safety. I think this was in clinical chemistry when they discussed chemical sterilizers. All right, now chemical sterilizers used for instruments. You need to remember in the OR they use glutaraldehyde because it's a non-corrosive. It's a non-corrosive for both metal and rubber. Sir, nagko-corrode din pala ang rubber? Yes. Okay? So wag niyo kalimutan, nagko-corrode din siya. All right? Any damage to rubber can cause significant any damage to rubber, especially for medical equipment, can cause a can significantly affect rather the health of your patient. So please be mindful of that, especially yung mga respirators. So please be mindful of those things. Okay? Now, there are 3 types of physical disinfection. So we've ended our discussion on physical sterilization. On sterilization for both physical and chemical. We also talked about dry and moist chemicals. We also talked about chemical sterilization. Now we're going to move on with disinfection. So there's 3 types of physical disinfection. I think you might be familiar with this. Lalo na yung mga nagdi-DIY ng pimple popping. Okay? Huwag gawin yon, ha, guys. Boiling is the first one. Pasteurization, all right, is another one. Non-ionizing UV. I think the only thing that you're not going to talk about in your whole career as a medtech is pasteurization, because this is for food microbiology as well, similar to inspisation. Okay? So non-ionizing radiation. Saan natin siya nakikita? Sa laboratory. Meron ako nakita maliit kayo na biosafety cabinet. Sa ika nga ni Sir Marco is a third world din yung laboratory. Saan nyo siya nakikita? Sa biosafety cabinet na BSL-3. Okay? BSL-2. Ano yung BSL, sir? Hindi pa ba? Wala pa. Hindi pa sila nakaakyat doon. Pakibigyan nga ng tour pag binigyan natin ng mahirap na exam, Sir Marco. Okay? Because meron akong 9 questions. Parang 6 pages na siya. 9 questions lang yun. Di ba? 6 A4 pages, okay? 6 pages, 9 questions lang yun. So galingan nyo, guys, ha. Galingan nyo. Binibigyan ko na kayo ng techniques kung paano nyo sasagutin yung mga questions na itatanong ko. Si Sir Manuel hindi nagtatanong yan na what is pasteurization? What is non-ionizing radiation? Hindi ganon. That is an insult to your intelligence. 'Di ba? Pag mga ganon ang mga tanungan. All right? Okay? Okay ba tayo? Non-ionizing radiation is used, I think, in biosafety cabinets just as an added precaution. Okay? So it already has negative pressure Your laboratory must have negative pressure as well as HEPA filters, and then an added layer of protection for you and the next user of the biosafety cabinet is non-ionizing radiation, which you can see in your biosafety cabinets. Okay, so what does a BSL-3 biosafety cabinet look like? So again, I'm going to help you guys out because I love you guys so much. This is what it looks like, BSL-3 cabinet. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this. So BSL-3 is something like this. And would you believe it? Fact lang for you guys. Actually, it was a Filipino who invented the glove compartment. Okay? It was actually a Filipino. I can't remember his name, but it was actually a Filipino who invented this one. I don't know why we are not getting enough money for this one, but this is actually what a biosafety level 3 cabinet looks like. And look at his PPE. Diba? Now, this is what you use when you enter. I think the minimum requirement for a laboratory that processes mycobacteria for mycobacteria. So you can see that there is a glove compartment there where you manipulate your specimens. Okay? So class 2 is commonly seen in many of the places I worked in, but when I visited a laboratory that processes viruses and I think PCR, especially during the height of the COVID pandemic, they use class 3. Class 1 is parang fume hood. As in literally negative pressure lang siya. Wala siyang HEPA filter. Medyo social ng konti si class 3. Si class 2 and si class 3 yung pinakabongga. Okay? Okay po ba? Clear? Mamaya natin pag-usapan ng mas malala yan. Alright? Okay, clear ba? Clear ba, Mark? Clear ba sa inyo? Okay?
Yes po.
Alright. What about for Eliza? Clear ba sa'yo, Eliza? Nagulat si Eliza. Oh. Kumakamot si Eliza. Nagulat si Eliza. Ganun talaga ako, guys. Ano ba? Binibigla ko kayo. Kaya gusto ko nakikita na yung ano. 'Di ba? Bagong rule namin ni Sir Marco, kailangan nakikita ko na yung mga mukha ninyo. Tingnan mo si Glenn Elan. 'Di ba? Oh, nakaano na siya, nakapatong na yung kamay niya doon sa noo niya. Kasabro ba to? Ito na naman yung pakikinggan naming lecture. Ano ba? Ganan. Gusto ko kasi nagigising kayo. Okay? Alright. So, what are the two types of pasteurization? So, hindi masyadong tinatanong sa mga medtech, pero why not? Idagdag na din natin. Alright? We have batch and flash. Alright? So, for batch, it's low temperature holding. This is also known as low temperature holding. Okay? So, usually at around 63 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes. Ano ba yung ginagamit natin sa autoclave? 121, di ba? For 15 minutes. Pero ito, 63 for 30 minutes. What about the other one? Flash, high temperature, short time. Higher temperature, 15 seconds. Sir, bakit? Akala ko we want to destroy the microorganisms. Pasteurization is a form of disinfection. So majority of the coliform bacteria will be destroyed at these temperatures, and you can serve food using this one. Actually, you can see certain labels on foods. I think canned meat. I think canned milk also. Canned products with milk in it requires one of the FDA requirements is to do pasteurization before sending it to the market. Okay? So, why is it lower? Bakit hindi 121? Sir, bakit ba natin yung autoclave na lang yung gatas? Hindi pwede kasi masisira yung taste quality. Yun yung reason kung bakit hindi pwedeng hindi pwedeng sobrang taas yung init. Kasi sayang naman yung food, 'di ba? Kung in-autoclave natin, mag-coagulate yung food, 'di ba? Ganon. Or masisira yung flavors, 'di ba? Ganon. Kaya kailangan kumakain tayo ng pasteurized mga food na kinukonsume natin. If ever it was for long-term storage, needs to at least be pasteurized, okay? Tulad ng kinakain ni Mark, 'di ba? May mga pasteurized, may pasteurized ano yan. And okay, it's okay with me if you guys eat kasi you know naman this is a 4-hour lecture. I think 4 hours or 5 hours. So I don't want you guys to be at your least attentive states. Okay? Now, let's talk about chemical disinfectants. So who here can give me examples of chemical disinfectants? Sige nga, chemical disinfectants. Maria, Christina, Kay, Sabado. Si Makay pala yan. Sorry, ang haba kasi. Alright, okay.
Alcohol po.
Okay, that's one. Do you have more? Eliza?
Phenol po.
Phenol, alright. Do you have more? Do you know more? Who else? Who else? Johaili porous. Oh, I love the lighting.
Formaldehyde po.
Formaldehyde. Hoy, formaldehyde kanina kakasabi lang natin ha. Ikaw ha. Ikaw ha.
Glutaraldehyde na lang po.
Hoy, kanina kakasabi lang din natin. Ikaw talaga ha. Kanina kakasabi lang natin. Johaili, ang ganda pa naman ng lighting. Ano pa? Kay, sige pa. So, thank you for participating, Johaili. You may try again after
Halogen.
today. Halogen. All right. Very good. Who else? Who else? Johaili again.
Hydrogen peroxide.
Hydrogen peroxide, kakasabi lang natin kanina, vapors din. Alright, what about Amanda Feliz? I like the name Amanda. Alright, Amanda, where are you? I need to see your face first before I can accept your answer. Where
Wait
is
lang, sir.
Amanda?
Bumabagal po kasi, sir. Bumabagal po, sir, pag naka-video. Pero, iodophore po.
Iodophore is also a form of, I think, halogen. Right? I think it's a halogen. Iodophores. There's one more. We're missing one more. We're missing two more. Somebody said phenol already. Alright? Somebody said halogen. Somebody said alcohol. We're missing two more. Not two more ha. Not T-U-M-O-R ha. Two more. Nigel said something. Nigel.
Quaternary ammonium compound.
Oh, Sir Marco, ayan na mas mataray. Oh, quaternary ammonium compounds. I love it. Or quats. Alright? What else? Last. James Paul.
Heavy metals po.
Heavy
Like mercury,
metals.
copper,
Bongga, talagang complete. Heavy metals is acceptable for me naman. Pero sige, talagang pagalingan ang mga students ngayon talaga. Natutuwa talaga ako. Active talaga sila, Sir Marco, today. Parang gusto kong pahabain lalo yung mga questions ko. Parang gusto ko lalong pahabain ang mga questions ko kasi highly competent ang mga ano natin. Every batch talaga. Akala ko meron kasi kaming theory ni Sir Marco din yun. If you don't mind me telling you the story, it's a short story lang naman. Parang sabi namin, parang pababa ang scores ng mga students. Kaya ngayon, parang natutuwa ako kasi mas attentive kayo. So, titingnan natin kung kayo yung magbe-break ng curse. Okay? Kung kayo yung magbe-break ng curse, ha? Kailangan, guys, you have to break the curse kasi my gosh. Ang professor ninyo, 'di ba? 'Di ba? Binubuli kayo. Charing. So, kailangan you guys have to break the curse kasi sabi niya, Sir Manuel, parang bumababa yung scores nila, no? The more na tinatanong natin sila ng the more na hindi naman humihirap, dumadali nga daw yung questions niya. So, iyon. Sabi niya, nako, kailangan tutukan ng pansin ang mga students. Okay? So, thank you so much. Tama kayo lahat. Yeah. The ones that were mentioned earlier, formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, I mentioned it earlier. Glutaraldehyde is used for instruments and the rubber because it is a non-corrosive for both. It's a non-corrosive chemical for both metals and rubber. But these 5 ones generally are the ones that you're going to see in the clinical laboratory. Okay? And if you're going to work in quality control, quality assurance, you're going to have what you call phenol standard. We have a phenol standard. I'll explain that to you a little bit later on. Okay? So the most common antiseptic or disinfectant alcohol is what you've always been hearing throughout the whole course of the pandemic is isopropyl and ethyl alcohol. Isopropyl is supposed to be 90, okay? 90% isopropyl alcohol. Let me just check. Yeah, not 70%. We changed that to 90% now. Okay? Please change it to 90%. 75% ethyl alcohol is also acceptable. This is actually just a couple of things that I copied off from an infection control manual. We changed it to 90% this time. Okay. All right, 90% isopropyl. So if there's any changes, just change it to 90%. I'll edit this one also. I'll write it on my notepad. Hang on a sec. So 121, 15 minutes. So those are the things that I need to change. Okay? So let's move on. So ethyl alcohol and isopropyl alcohol is some of the things that you need to remember as your disinfectants. So you might be asked the question, which of the following? All of the following are chemical sterilizers except for, right? Those are probably some of the questions that you're going to say. Or you can say they would give you a list of chemicals. Please select which ones are disinfectants. Please select which ones are sterilizers. So be mindful of these things, okay? So again, these could be questions that may be asked of you in microbiology or in clinical chemistry, because in clinical chemistry there is what you call laboratory safety. And in laboratory safety, one of the key components of laboratory safety is infection control. So basically it's the same thing. So you might expect it in microbiology, you might expect the question also again in clinical chemistry. So it might overlap. So the knowledge might overlap, but the same thing applies on all. Okay? So please, baka magulat kayo. Bakit ganon? Tinanong sa amin sa clinical chemistry, merong kasi last time may mga ganon na mga student, 'di ba? 'Di ba Sir Marco? May mga ganon na mga student last time. Bakit wala pang sumasagot ng hand hygiene is a form? Sino bang Hi, 8:16 ko pa tinanong, wala pang sumasagot nung initial question ko na, is hand hygiene a form of disinfection or sterilization? Kayo talaga ha? Hindi kayo sumasagot. Nigel, tiningnan mo na. I know. Ngayon mo lang tiningnan. Ikaw talaga ha? Nako. Sagutin nyo na yan. Diyan lang sa chat box. Okay? Alright. So, okay. So, when we move on to the next one, which is basically halogens. Okay? So we can use either chlorine or iodine. Okay. So for iodine, we use it for mostly by blood operations. Okay. For operations, I think in blood banks also they're using iodine also. This time I think they changed iodine to chlorhexidine, but basically it's basically still the same reagent. They had iodine chlorhexidine. Okay, so chlorhexidine is a chemical variant of iodophores. It's an it's halogen based. Okay, chlorine is in industrial microbiology. So where do you think chlorine is used as an antiseptic? Sige nga. Chlorine. Sino makakasagot niyan? Sir, totoo. Ginagamit din pala as antiseptic ang chlorine. Bigyan ko kayo ng clue. Napaka-popular niya every summer. Ayan na. Sino makakasagot? Sige, Jeneline Marzan. Di ba ngayon ko lang nakita si Jeneline Marzan? Tama. Yes. Correct. Ganon. Para may energy. Kasi ako, anong oras pa lang dito? Di ba? So, correct. 'Di ba? Para dapat may energy din dapat to katulad ni Jeneline. Thank you so much. So sa pools, 'di ba? So again, baka mamaya magulat na naman kayo, tinanong na naman, "Sir, akala ko ba sa bacteriology tatanong 'yan?" Tandaan niyo, pag chlorine, this is essential for destroying microorganisms, not so much for Naegleria fowleri. Ano na naman yung Naegleria fowleri, sir? Parasite yung Naegleria fowleri, di ba? Brain-eating amoeba. Chlorinated pools are at risk of swimmers of patients, swimmers of swimmers of chlorinated pools are at risk of Naegleria fowleri. Bakit? Paano ba inaalis si Naegleria fowleri? Salination. Okay? Pinapaalat. Okay? Pag saline, ano ba ang pag saline ang laman ng pag saline ang laman ng isang solution or pag salinated ang isang solution, merong salt. Okay? Kasi 'di ba ano ba yung normal saline solution natin? NaCl, 'di ba? So, yon. Alright? Baka mamaya ako din na magtuturo sa inyo sa may parasitology. Bigla ko lang dinagdag dito sa question. Which of the following microorganisms is removed through salination? Baka mamaya, oy, sir, di ba parasite yun? Hindi naman yun bacteria. Sabi ko, microorganism. Single-celled organism. Di ba si amoeba, Naegleria fowleri. So kailangan ganun ang thinking natin. Hindi pwede yung magrereklamo dahil sa question walang ganon. Okay? Nigel ha? Baka babaya isa ka doon sa magkasabi kay Sir Marco ninyo. Sir, nagtanong si Sir Manuel ng ganon. Di ba sa parasitology yan? Hoy, pag nag-exam ka, microbiology lang ang title ha? Nigel ha? Mas ginaya ko pa talaga yung boses ni Nigel. Yun lang ina-imagine ko yung boses mo, Nigel. Hindi naman talaga yun yung voice mo. I meant no offense, girl, because you're so pretty. Just like me. Alright? Okay. So let's move on to the next one. How does one prepare the following? Ayan na, iodophore. Sige. Let's start first with iodophores. How do you prepare iodophore? Sige. I don't need numbers first. Wala muna akong kailangan na numbers. Okay? Let's just go with the general one. Okay. McKay, can you give me the answer?
Iodine plus detergent po.
All right, wonderful. I love it. What about sodium hypochlorite? Now, this one I need the numbers. Who can answer? Sodium hypochlorite. This one I need numbers. Dilution specifically. Ayan na. Alright. Okay. Sige.
Ano po, 0.5 sodium chloride plus water po.
Plus water. Sodium chloride. Yeah, that's correct. I think you have an advanced copy of my lecture. What's the dilution? Sige. Since nandiyan na din lang naman sa'yo ang What's the dilution? 1 is to what?
1:100.
Alright. Now, in the clinical laboratory, how many percent sodium hypochlorite do we need? Anybody? Percent naman, hindi yung dilution ha. Iba yung dilution, iba yung percent. Volume. Mark, my handsome moderator.
Sir, 0.05% to 0.5%.
Totoo ba? Alright. Thank you so much for participating. Who here can answer the question? How many percent of sodium hypochlorite or bleach? Sige na, bleach. Pinaltan ko lang, pinasosyal ko lang. Sodium hypochlorite, nakalimutan na. Kayo talaga, guys, ha? Infection control questions. How many percent do we need? Ito na, magbigay akong choices. Ay, may nagsagot na. Sige. May sasagot. Sino yung nagtaas ng kamay? Hindi ko nakita. Wala siya bigla.
Sir, 5%.
5%? Sige, next. Mary Oquiza. Oquiza? Okay, Mary Oquiza.
Okiza po, sir.
Oquiza.
10% po.
Very good. 10% is actually one of the key questions that you will see in your exams. Okay? So please remember the percentages. So iodophores is prepared using iodine and using an iodine solution plus detergent. Okay? And sodium hypochlorite is prepared using water and sodium chloride. Okay? So bleach.
Sir, additional lang, no?
Oo.
Yung 10% bleach na yan, Every month nyo gagawin yan sa rotation nyo sa hospital.
Yeah. 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 Every month. Yung
Oo.
pang spray bottle. Yeah. Oh my God. I remember
I
when I
hate,
was an intern.
I hated doing that kasi ang daming papagawa sa yung galon.
Actually, yan yung pinakamasaya kasi nakakatakas ka sa trabaho sa amin. Sa amin, makakatakas ka dyan. Pero mabigat nga lang yung mga galon. Tapos one time pa natapunan nung co-intern ko yung sa ano niya. USD co-intern ko yun. Black ata ang pants ninyo, sir. Hindi ko alam ngayon kung nag-intern na. Black ang pants. Natapunan.
Black pa din.
Black pa din. Natapunan yung pants niya ng bleach. My God, yung pure na ano pa. My God. O, diba? Sayang tuloy ang pants ni co-intern ko. Buti na lang mayaman siya. Like my other UST co-interns, 'di ba? Ganun talaga siya. Buti na lang mayaman siya. Ay, naku, okay lang 'yan, Manuel. 'Di ba? Yung mga ganun pa. Pero the whole day kulay orange yung lower part ng pants niya. Anyway, let's move on. Thank you for that wonderful story, sir. Now, let's move on to chlorine. Okay? Chlorine is inactivated by what substance? Sir, bakit kailangan natin itanong yung chlorine ba yan? Ba't pa ulit-ulit yung chlorine na yan? Kasi madami tayong mga organisms na makukuha kapag hindi chlorinated ang pool tuloy. Ang pool, lalo na yung mga Pseudomonas aeruginosa, yung mga ganyan. Alright? So, sodium thiosulfate. So, saan ba galing ang sodium thiosulfate? Yung mga sabon na yung mga yung mga sunscreen na ginagamit natin, it has sodium thiosulfate. Tapos yung pag nagpapakulot kayo, yung pag nagpa-perm, may residue ng sodium thiosulfate yon. So, majority of the time, people get hair-related infections when they go into a chlorinated pool with damaged scalps, okay? With damaged scalps. And then they just gone 3 days after 3 days they went to the pool. I would not advise you to go to the pool if you have damaged hair, and then if you have damaged scalps or certain bumps or cracks in your scalp, and then you just came in for a perm. Not only will it destroy the perm, but the water will destroy the perm, but you might be at risk of getting an infection. Okay? So, chlorinated pool. So, yung mga may sodium thiosulfate. Because the most common is the most common thing that you're going to see in these scenarios is basically the question is asking directly about sodium thiosulfate. Malay nyo, itanong ko. Malay nyo lang naman, di ba? Alright? Next, we're going to move on with the heavy metals that we use. Sir, ginagamit din ang heavy metals? Oo, hahampasin mo ng isang tabla ng iron na steel ang mikrobyo. Ganon, hindi. Hindi ganon ang pag-disinfect. Hindi mo hahampasin ng heavy metal. Okay? Ang gagamitin mo is, of course, mercury, copper, or silver. Okay? So, mercury is in the form of merthiolate. Copper is in the form of what you call as a reagent known as algicide. Okay? Copper is usually used in many I think it's used in fish tanks. Why is it algicide? Because it removes algae. Okay? It removes algae. And silver, if you're not familiar with silver, it was traditionally used for Creed's prophylaxis. Are you familiar with Creed's prophylaxis? Thank you, Mary, for answering the question. Yung iba hindi sumagot. So, parang si Mary lang ang bibigyan ko ata ng 100. Alright? So, titingnan ko pa. Magde-decide pa ako. Mamaya at the end of the lecture, parang pag wala ko nakitang nakasagot, mas bongga ang sagot sa iyo, bibigyan kita mamaya ng prize. Okay? So, what's Creed's prophylaxis? Sige, Google na. Creed's prophylaxis. Are you guys familiar with Creed's prophylaxis? Have you heard of it? Is this the first time you've heard of it? You can be honest, don't worry. Creed's prophylaxis. Nag-google. Kitang-kita ko si Joe Hailey, oh. Joe Hailey, ha? Nag-google ka, ha? Okay lang 'yan. At least you're looking for information. O 'di ba? Live ang knowledge na ang pagkuha natin ng knowledge. Hindi katulad dati kapag magsusulat ang nung time na hindi pa mabilis ang internet nung nag-aaral ako, hindi pa ako ganoon katanda, people ha. Huwag kayong ganyan. Walang ganon. Hindi pa ako ganoon katanda ha. Susulat lang 'yan ng professor namin sa may ano, sa may whiteboard. And then, ay blackboard pala kami sa sa school namin. Sulat lang niya yan, alright, I need you to answer this by next week. O di ba by next week, ang tanong, o dito ngayon malapit lang. Conjunctivitis, very good. Conjunctivitis. Pero, Creed's prophylaxis is used sana man lang kinumpleto natin, no, James Paul. Nagulat ako, bigla ka na lang nag-type ng conjunctivitis. Malay ko kung may conjunctivitis ka, James Paul. Ano bang ibig mong sabihin diyan, James Paul? Sige nga, paki-explain. Alright, newborn conjunctivitis using 2% silver nitrate. Amanda, you're starting to become my favorite na. Wala kasi yung anak kong bading eh. Wala, wala. All right. So Amanda ha, Amanda, parang you're growing into me na. Growing into me like a fungus. Hindi, walang ganon. Sa listahan ko ng mga students na parang naaalala ko kaagad. Amanda ha. All right. So Creed's prophylaxis uses silver nitrate. Ideal percentage is actually 1%, but 1 to 2% is still okay. Well, why did I write 1%? This is because it's the one that is seen in the books that I've read. But percentages doesn't really matter. You can write 1 to 5% pa nga dun sa ibang libro. So it's inconsistent, but this is from my own research. So, what I need you guys to remember is, of course, we use the reagent silver nitrate. Okay? So, I need you to remember this one. Okay? So, anong ginagawa ba? Paano ba ang procedure niya? So, for example, ang anak ko is si Mark Segi. Okay? Kakairi ko lang sa kanya. Alright? Sa aking imaginary na sapupunan. Baby pa si Mark Segi. Ganyan. Sa aking imaginary na sinapupunan. Meron yung 1% sa Pamit Quiz Show 2019. Yeah! Mga ganyan, sa mga Pamit Quiz Show, 1% talaga, sir. Tinanong talaga kung ilang percent. kasi iba-iba yung sources ko, tapos sasabihin 1 to 5%, yung isa naman 2%, yung isa naman 3.5%. So, nilagay ko na lang yung pinaka-smallest. 'Di ba? O, sige. O, sabi ni Sir Marco, 1% daw. So, Amanda, I'm sorry. I just removed you from the list of my of people who are growing into me. So, kailangan you have to prove yourself pa ulit. Kakainis ka talaga, Sir Marco eh. Alright? So, 1% sodium nitrate, sodium nitrate, silver nitrate is used. So again, how do we use it? So, example, inilabas ko sa aking imaginary na sinapupunan si Mark Segi. Baby Mark Segi is like this. His head will be like this. We'll use this as an analog for Mark Segi. So, ang gagawin lang natin is yung eyes niya, lalagyan lang natin ng konti. Nakapikit pa yan, hindi pa mumulat yan. So, hindi mabubulag yung baby, okay? So, traditionally, this is what is done traditionally, okay? But today, they're using different ones. I think it's more on iodophores na ang ginagamit ngayon kasi we live in the century that's much more advanced both medically and technologically. Okay, so lalagyan lang yung eyes na ganun, papahiran lang. Kaya makikita nyo yung mga ibang baby pictures ng mga ninuno ninyo or yung mga parents ninyo. May makikita kayo parang orange yung line sa hindi yun makeup ha. Hindi yun nagtatry yung nurse mag-contour. Huwag kayong etchusera dyan, ha. Nilagyan nyo ng para hindi mabulag. Kasi sometimes, beta hemolytic strep can cause infections, okay? Beta hemolytic strep can cause, what else? Neisseria gonorrhoeae can cause ophthalmia neonatorum. I'll spell it for you guys here. Ophthalmia neonatorum, okay? Which will actually be deadly, okay? Ophthalmia neonatorum is, for example, nanganak si mother tapos meron siyang current infection of Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Okay? The Neisseria species can be caught whilst the baby is being evacuated into the vaginal canal. And it might reach the eyes of the baby, and it could cause permanent damage. Okay, it can cause permanent damage. especially if the baby is immunocompromised to begin with. Okay? So sometimes hindi naman lahat ng baby pare-parehas, 'di ba, ang status. So sometimes babies can die from this one because it can cause neonatal septicemia. So be mindful of these kinds of questions. So if you hear the word ophthalmia neonatorum, a question would probably be directing you towards either Neisseria or what type of reagent is usually used to prevent this particular disease, this particular condition. Okay? So next is, of course, quaternary ammonium compound. What is the most commonly used quaternary ammonium compound? It's known as Cefiram. Okay? Cefiram is a trade name. Actually, I'm supposed to write TM there. Sorry for making it, sorry for not adding TM. It's a non-sporicidal, non-tuberculoid. Okay? So you get to see this not just in the clinical laboratory, but also in places where you need in water treatment facilities. Because sometimes there's spores. We want to remove the spores. Non-tuberculoid, we want to remove especially for sources of water for hospitals. Why? Because we have what you call Mycobacterium gordonei, and it is the most common cause of nosocomial infections. Okay, so Mycobacterium gordonei, and I think members of Mycobacterium ulcerans. Members from the Microbacterium avium intercellulare complex. So the reason why they want to remove it is because we want to remove the inert tuberculoid organisms. Zefiram is the one that we use. Okay. So you might encounter questions that because there is which of the following is you might be asked the question. An outbreak of Mycobacterium gordonei was seen in majority of nosocomial infections in this particular hospital. Which of the following should hospital administrators use to reduce the number of non-tuberculoid infections? Okay? So mga ganong questions ko. Hindi ako nagtatanong ng mga what do you use when you want to remove tuberculoid or non-tuberculoid organisms in so it's supposed to be antisporicoid and anti-tuberculoid. Anti-non-tuberculoid. I forgot to add anti. It's supposed to be anti. So when you receive your copies of the lecture, you'll have an edited version of this one. So okay. So formula for phenol coefficient. So phenol status or phenol coefficient can be used interchangeably. This could be a question that I'm going to ask you. So what is the formula for phenol coefficient? So phenol coefficient is the highest concentration of disinfectant that can kill an organism at a given time. While your denominator is supposed to be phenol, the highest concentration of phenol that can kill an organism at a given time. So what do you think is the purpose of using phenol coefficient based on this question, based on your understanding of this one? Sige nga. What can you infer from this particular data that I just gave you? This is a formula, of course. Okay? Sinong makakasagot sa akin ito? May additional one. May magbibigay ako ng 100. Sige. Lagay natin yung timer. Baka mapagastos ako eh. Alright? Maglalagay tayo ng timer. Bigay tayo ng 5 minutes para mag-isip. And I'm going to drink. 5 minutes muna. Ayan, 5 minutes. Sige. Who can give me a concrete answer as to why is it relevant that we use phenol coefficient? Alagay natin ha. What is the relevance of Ayan. Yes, Sir Marco, yes. Alam mo naman ako, 'di ba, Sir Marco? Hindi ka kasali. Hindi ka kasali. Ano ba? Limpak-limpak na pera ang inaano mo, yung kinikita mo para mambuli ng mga estudyante. Hindi ka kasali. Meron akong bibigay sa iyo pag nakalayas tayo ng ibang ano ka ba? Kung mag-alala, hindi kita kakalibutan kapag alala diyan, ha. Chill ka lang. Alright, sila muna. Okay? Sige. Wala, inom muna ako ng tubig. I'll close my microphone. Okay, so may makakasagot. A test to determine how clean is clean. Hmm. Huh. Hmm. Eh. Ito yung ano mo, data mo, oh. Okay. What about Arnie? Nag-open si Arnie ng camera niya eh. Arnie, may sagot ka ba? McKay said measure efficacy. Hmm. Okay, Nigel.
Dahil yung time of contact po and yung potency or concentration ng disinfectant ay factors doon sa pagdi-disinfect.
Hmm. All right. It indicates the effectiveness of a disinfectant. Yeah, tama si Sir Marco, kulang din. It indicates the effectiveness of a disinfectant. Kulang din ang sagot ni Eliza. Kulang na kulang. Guys, we have 26 minutes. My God, pwede i-combine nyo lang yung sinabi nyo, oh. Kayo talaga. A test to determine germicidal efficiency of the... Yeah, okay. But yeah, you got that is correct. But we're talking about phenol coefficient. Why is phenol used, right? Why is it used? What's the importance of this coefficient? Diba? All right, so time's up. All right, so time's up. Okay, so nobody gave me an answer. All right, so kulang nga. Yeah, kulang talaga sabi ni Sir Marco, 'di ba? Okay? So, ano ba ang kwenta ng phenol coefficient? So, basically, explain ko sa inyo ha. Phenol is, ano ba to? Effectiveness of disinfectant as a germicide. Unfortunately, Johaili actually has the closest answer. Um, Effectiveness of a disinfectant, or actually lumayo yung answer niya because of the antiseptic. So it's supposed to be her typographical error. Her typographical error that she committed almost costed her to not get the crash prize, but and she's out of she answered it late, but she got the closest answer. So it's the one that her answer is the effectiveness. It's the measure, rather, the measure of the effectiveness of a disinfectant or an antiseptic as a germicide against an established antiseptic agent such as phenol. Okay? So ano bang ginagawa niya? What does it do? Well, phenol is what we call your gold standard. Alam niyo yung mga gold standard, di ba? So phenol is already established as a gold standard disinfectant. Okay? So we use it as a coefficient because the contact time of phenol is so much more greater as a disinfectant. So remember, phenol kills probably 50%, 99.9% of agents that can cause diseases, and the rest would be left as normal flora. Okay? So this one is already known. Phenol is already known as that kind of an agent. Now, if you're for example, you are Nigel, you discovered that, oh my gosh, merong minahan ako ng antiseptic dito sa likod ng bakuran namin. Gusto kong i-patent. So lalapit ako sa FDA. At isa sa mga gagawin nila is phenol coefficient. Iko-compare nila yung effectiveness or efficacy according to somebody said it, according to McKay, they're going to compare the efficacy of Nigel's reagent, new antiseptic rather, with that of an established reagent such as phenol. Okay? Kaya kailangan ng computation na yan. Right? Okay? So, the next question is, organisms used for calculating phenol coefficient is, of course, the most common is Staph aureus and Salmonella typhi. Okay? Staph aureus because it causes skin-related diseases. It can be transferred also via skin contact. Salmonella typhi can be notorious, especially for populations wherein there is a decrease. There is a lack of water. Okay? So, yung mga hindi masyado naghugas ng kamay, or hindi maganda ang panghugas sila ng kamay. So basically, these are analogs for both gram-positive organism. Salmonella is an analog. Staph aureus is an analog for gram-positive organisms, and Salmonella is an analog for gram-negative organisms. So these are the control organisms that we use. So gagamitin natin muna si phenol. Given time natin is 30 minutes, depending on the manufacturer insert, and then Nigel's antiseptic. We call it Nigel's magic dust. Okay? Or Nigel's magic alcohol. All right? So we compare these two things. We expose them at least 30 minutes apart, and we culture these two, the solution, and then we count how much or is the difference between the two. Okay? So yung concentration, highest concentration, and then we start first, of course, there is a serial dilution to it, but the end result is that it's supposed to be comparable to phenol. That's the gist of it. We're not going to delve deep into the calculations, but I just need you to remember the importance of phenol coefficient. Okay? Now, there is data that you need to remember. So hindi ko bibigay sa inyo yung computation. Hindi ko kayo pagko-computein. Alright? Mahaba siyang problem solving. Alright? Marami pa akong questions na ibibigay sa inyo na mas mahirap. What I need you to remember is the phenol coefficient results. So how do you interpret the phenol coefficient results? If it's greater than 1, okay? It's greater than 1, the disinfectant is better than phenol. Okay? If it's less than 1, obviously it's the reverse. Phenol is better. If the phenol coefficient is greater than 1, is equal to 1, then the disinfectant is the efficacy is equivocal to that of phenol. Gets nyo? Kung anong importance niya? So the value will just revolve around 1. And what I want you to remember is the interpretation, not really the formula, because I'm not going to ask you the question. I'm not going to ask the question about compute the phenol coefficient. Mahaba siyang story. Okay? Not only will it be a headache for me, but it will be a headache especially for you guys. But I can make a question for that one. And I don't want, sobrang dami. Diba? Pag masyadong madami, mas marami pa akong mahirap na itatanong na questions. Okay? Okay, mag-alala. So, ganun ang pag-interpret ha. For example, so, ang question ko, for example, ang Nigel's magic potion scored 1.01. What is the interpretation? Sige nga, Nigel.
Better than phenol.
Very good. All right. So see, napakadali lang, 'di ba? Napakadali lang. So ganun yung makikita ninyong mga questions pagka meron kayong mga exams related to this one. Maring itanong ko, mari ding hindi, depende sa mood namin ni Sir Marco pag nagbigay siya ng diagnostic exam. Gusto ko makita, Sir Marco, yung Google Forms nung exam nila. Titingnan natin kung pahirapan ko sila. Para mabago ang mood ko. Diba? Ganun. Okay, now, we use biological indicators for the following, as I mentioned before. Okay? So, autoclave, ano nga ang ginagamit natin for autoclave? Ulit-ulitin ko kasi isa sa mga pinaka-important. It's a must-know. It's a must-know. Alright? So, sino makakasagot? Autoclave. Biological indicator. Sinabi na kanina ni James Paul. May nagtaas ng kamay. Please show yourself. Eliza? Ay, sorry, si Clarice. Sorry, si Clarice pala. Sorry, si Clarice.
Bacillus thermophilus.
Okay, the pronunciation is a little bit off, but don't worry. At least you know the organism, okay? So you're going to be asked multiple choice questions, so don't worry about it, okay? So Bacillus thermophilus, okay? Thank you so much, Clarice. What about ionizing radiation? I mentioned it earlier also. Sorry, non-ionizing radiation pa yung sinabi ko kanina. For ionizing radiation, it's different, okay? But somebody can answer. Who raised their hand? Show yourself on camera. Alright, what about James Paul? Alright. Ionizing radiation.
Sir, yung indicator po, Bacillus tumelis po.
Alright, thank you so much. What about for dry heat oven? I asked this earlier. I also told you guys this earlier. Rosalind Gaspar. Rosalind or Rosalind? I'm not sure if I saw that one correctly. Rosalind. Alright. Alright. What's your answer for dry heat oven?
Bacillus subtilis
Varniger. Alright, thank you so much. Hi, maanohan tayo dyan. Ma-demonetize ang video natin dyan, ha? Hoy, yung last na sinabi mo, ha? Hoy. Alright, next. Ethylene oxide. Last one. Sige, who can answer the last one? Ethylene oxide. Sige, wala. James Paul again, or talagang James Paul is really growing on me na like a fungus also. All right, James Paul.
Bacillus subtilis bar globigi.
Globigi? Globigi?
Bar globigi.
I need another one. McKay?
Bacillus subtilis var globalis.
All right, thank you so much. That's the correct answer, Mark. Sorry, not Mark. James. Thank you so much. All right, your answers are all correct. Thank you so much for participating. Okay, so dry heat oven, autoclave, ionizing radiation, and ETO or ethylene oxide. Okay, now most commonly used biosafety cabinet in the clinical laboratory is of course biosafety level 2, and the difference between these two from biosafety number level 1 is the fact that it has laminary airflow, or what you call the HEPA filters. Okay? So that's the we can change this, we can update this to HEPA filters, okay? So please add this to your notes later on. Okay? 192A, laminary airflow. Okay? And HEPA filter. Okay? So ano ba yung HEPA filter, sir? Yun yung narinig nyo lagi kapag ka pinag-uusapan yung paggawa ng mga kwarto na ano tawag doon yung sa COVID. Naalala nyo yung malaki ang nagastos ng gobyerno para bumili ng mga HEPA filter, mga ganun. I'm going to stop at that because people's political views might come into question here. And this is a science related question, not so much a political view question. Meron tayong time dyan if ever magkita tayo sa medtech laws. Okay? Now, we are going to go next we're going to go to our next discussion, which is about specimen collection and storage and handling. Now, each specimen will be handled with care, of course, but each microorganism has special considerations, especially if the clinical implication is different. These are just for general specimen collection and storage handling. So, for example, you might hear me say that, oh, you need to do disinfection for the sample first, or you need to use decontamination first. So that is different. That is a special procedure that is done whenever there is suspicion of a particular microorganism. So for example, you need to do an extra step for specimens that might be considered positive for Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So this will not be discussed here. Okay? We'll discuss that in Mycobacterium tuberculosis in our topic in Mycobacterium tuberculosis, because that is a specialized topic. So here is just general questions. You need to need to remember the general specimen collection, storage, and handling. So specimen collection, how we collect the specimens, when do we collect the specimens, what are the types of specimens that you're going to collect. Storage is of course what temperature considerations that we need to take care of, what type of media do we need to do, and handling is of course something that you need to remember as well. Handling talks about what type of or the amount of time it needs to be planted or inoculated to a culture media before a sample is labeled as non-viable specimens. So what's the difference between a viable specimen and a non-viable specimen? Sige nga. Kasi you might see questions that, which of a viable specimen for blah blah blah. Baka kasi nakalimutan, baka kasi hindi nyo naintindihan pala pag ang tinatanong sa inyo is, what is a viable specimen and what is a non-viable specimen? Sige nga. Sige. Oh, wala ano. What about, let's ask somebody in random. Let's ask somebody randomly. Yung isa po viable, yung isa po hindi. Oh, ayan na, binigyan na kayo ng clue. Sige, kasi may mga questions, di ba, Sir Marco, na may mga vocabulary words pala sila hindi na gets, tapos sagot lang ng sagot. Di ba? Sige, Clarice Solabo. What do you mean by a viable specimen? What do you mean by a non-viable specimen?
Viable specimen po is yung living organism po siya. Then yung non-viable po, non-living organism po.
Okay. So she got it partly correct. Yeah, I can accept that. Pero yung specimen mo hindi living organism. Yung kulangot mo, ibig mo sabihin, yung kulangot mo, Clarice, living organism yun. Hindi. Ano ka ba? May ma-isolate lang. Okay? So viable specimens are specimens where you can get live microorganisms, or you can obtain or there is a certain yield. 'Diba? Yun nga yung mga ginagamit ng mga terminology ng mga microbiologist kasi. So kaya naalala ko kasi last time gumawa ako ng question, ang daming maling nakasagot. Alright? So iniba ko lang, 'di ba? Which of the following would yield a higher amount of ano? Parang yun yata yung question ko ata Sir Marco last time, no? Binago ko lang yung question. Parang kasi ang naalala ng mga student kasi where you can get a large amount of or you can get or as you could get a copious amount or you could make a lot of subcultures. Parang ganun ata yung tinanong ko last time. Binaltan ko lang ng viable. So sabi ko, okay. Kasi majority of the questions that you'll be asked, viable ang ginagamit nila. So that's the reason why I remembered this particular question and I'm going to ask it to you guys now so that we don't get to, we avoid similar conundrums or vocabulary conundrums in your exams. Okay? So viable is correct. Yeah. What Clarice said is partly correct, but the specimen is not a living organism. Okay? Okay? So yun lang ang comment ko dun sa sagot niya. So these are specimens where you can get a higher yield of organisms when you're isolating them, and another is where you can isolate a specific organism. For example, you want to get only a gram-negative organism in that particular in that particular specimen. That's considered as a viable specimen. Okay? So understood? Okay, so opposite. A non-viable specimen is of course the opposite. So expect that your sample is non-viable if the sample was collected a week prior to submitting to the laboratory. 'Di ba? A week tapos ano siya? Agar-based transport media siya. So of course you're going to reject that because part of your job or your responsibility in the laboratory, if you do pursue medical technology, if you do pursue clinical laboratory science as your career, is rejecting and accepting specimens. Ang sample kung ang sample sputum, tapos kahapon pa pala kinuha, i-accept ba natin yun or hindi? Class. Sige. Hindi. May mga tumatango. May mga nakita ko mga tumatango na hindi. Kasi, alam natin na wala tayong makukuha na organisms. Nategi na, di ba? So good. And at least meron tayong understanding. Alright? So, sometimes we just need to read the questions a little bit para mag-sink in. Huwag kayong nagmamadali sa exams, ha? Huwag kayong nagmamadali sa exams, please lang. Okay? Alright? Okay, now, storage temperature for the following. Ayan na. Ito na yung ito na yung pinaka-common na questions in your exams. You have to mark 193 as an important question, okay? 193. CSF. What is the ideal temperature, storage temperature for CSF? Madami akong katrabaho dun sa previous work ko na gawa ng incident report dahil mali ang storage temperature na ginamit nila for CSF, especially tube 1 which is used for microbiology. Okay? So, what is the ideal storage temperature for CSF? Marami ding mga students ako na nakita na nagkaroon ng demerit dahil 10 days demerit ata yung naibigay sa isang student sa isang intern dahil mali ang pag-store ng CSF. Mary or Chris said 20 to 25. Mary or Chris said. What about other people? $37 according to Eliza. According to James Paul, it's 35. Body temperature. All right, we'll see later on. Okay. All right. We'll end that one here. I'll put an underline there. That's for CSF. For bacteria, yes, that is for bacteriology. Remember when doctors collect for CSF, they have 3 tubes. Okay? First tube goes to microbiology, second tube goes to hematology. Hematology, and the third tube goes to clinical chemistry. Okay? The least amount of blood will go to clinical chemistry lagi. Yun yung lagi kong paalala. The least amount of blood or contamination will go to clinical chemistry. The third one is, of course, your control. The fourth one is your control. Okay? There's some books that mention there's a fourth one. Okay? So let's go with swabs, urine, and viral and culture for viral culture or for viral studies. I put an underline there. So other answers that you need to answer is about swabs and urine, swabs, urine, and viral culture. What's the temperature? Again, you can type in the chat. Somebody says 4 degrees Celsius, refrigerated temp. Okay. 4 degrees Celsius. So people are answering 4 degrees Celsius. 4 degrees Celsius also. All right. Ref temp, according to Rajlin Gilas. According to Angelica Vergara, it's 4 degrees Celsius. Okay. So we're going to end it there. Mark Segi also answered 4 degrees Celsius. All right. So I'm going to end it there. I already put an underline there. Okay. We'll see later on if the majority of you guys answered correctly. Next, tissue for long-term storage. Tissue for long-term storage. Negative degree, negative, okay. Negative 70, negative 70. All right. People are answering unanimously. So there's a unanimous agreement between them. Now, my question is, are they correct? Diba, Sir Marco? Are they correct? All right. So we're going to end the question there. I'm going to put an underline in this one. And our next question is storage for serum. Okay? So, gumagamit ba ng serum sa micro? Yes. Negative 20, negative 20, negative 20, negative 20. So everybody's again in agreement in this one. It's negative 20 degrees Celsius. All right. So people are in agreement. All right. So that is it. All right. The last person who answered is Ira Joy Bautista. Get away from your keyboards. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So let's go and answer it one by one. TSF for microbiology. First tube is 37 degrees Celsius. Most of you guys are correct. Somebody answered room temperature. So please. For room temperature, that is for hematology. Why is it room temperature for hematology? Sir, bakit ganon? Sir, why you lying? Ganon. Why are you lying, sir? I thought it was at room temperature. For hematology, it's at room temperature because why? Similar to blood, similar to whole blood samples, EDTA whole blood samples, if a sample for hematological studies are prolonged, the cells will shrink or the morphology of the cells will be affected, right? If you put it in a higher temperature, the cells will lyse, right? Or they will swell up. If you put it in a smaller in a colder temperature, the cells will either shrink or they will lyse. Or, worst of all, is that ice particles can pierce through the cells, affecting the cellular morphology. Okay? So, that's the reason why we keep it at 37 degrees Celsius for microbiology. We want the organisms, pathologic microorganisms, to survive. Alright? That's why it's at 37 degrees Celsius. What about for urine, stools, and swabs? We put it at 4 degrees Celsius. Okay? Refrigerated temp always. Why? We want to prevent overgrowth of unnecessary organisms or non-pathologic organisms. Remember that the stool and the urine comes from where? It comes from where? From areas of the body where there is normal flora. Swabs also come from areas of the body where there is skin flora. Kapag nilagay mo siya sa 37 degrees Celsius, katulad ni CSF, dadami yung laman ng tae. Mahihirapan kang i-isolate kung meron mang ano, 'di ba? Yung igit, 'di ba, Nigel, yung igit, kapag nilagay mo sa 37 degrees Celsius, magkakaroon ng julate 'yan. 'Di ba? Hindi pwede yon. Okay? So 4 degrees Celsius dapat. So dapat tandaan nyo, there is a common sense aspect to all of these things, by the way. So kita nyo, pagka mas marami, sa tingin ko, sabi ni sir, mas maraming normal flora doon sa may ano. So ibig sabihin, ilalagay ko siya sa room temp. Ay, hindi siya pwedeng ilagay sa room temp. Ganon. Dapat. Ganon ang thinking ng mga students, ha. Okay? So there is a certain level of common sense in the temperature storage of your samples. Okay? Next is tissues for long-term storage. Long-term nga di ba? Long-term. Ibig sabihin, baka halwatin nyo pa some other time, di ba? Parang hindi convinced si sir na nakakita. Hindi convinced yung pathologist na nakakita kayo ng nocardia asteroides. Okay? So we want to put it in an ultra low freezer. Okay? 37 degrees Celsius. Negative 70 degrees Celsius. Alright? For serum, need to put it at negative 20 degrees Celsius. Bakit? Saan ba ginagamit ang serum? Sige nga, sa microbiology. Sige. Microbiology. Kailan tayo gumagamit ng serum as a sample for microbiology samples? Serology, 'di ba? 'Di ba? Serology. So negative 20 degrees Celsius. Some laboratories, they do serological studies in the microbiology section. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily mean the serology. Okay sir, serology yan so hindi ko na yan kailangan alalahanin dito sa ano. Remember, Widal, Will-Felix, okay? Brussels studies. These are done primarily in the microbiology section. ASO titers are also done the manual ASO titers are usually done in microbiology in most laboratories that I've worked in. Okay? Anong ginagawa sa serology, sir? Yung ibang mga microorganisms, 'di ba? Or viruses, 'di ba? Yorn. So may automated kasi ang majority of serology tests. So you can do Widal testing automatic na ngayon with the Architect C400 CI 4100, I think. That's from Abbott, and I think Beckman Coulter also does it automatically. So that's what we do in serology, automated version or the semi-automated version. But for us in microbiology, majority of the tests that we do there is almost, if not manual. 90% of the tests and even inoculation is still done manually. Even in hospitals that are considered advanced, okay? Pero sumusosyal ang mundo ngayon kasi meron na yung auto-inoculator. Hindi ko alam kung nakakita na kayo ng auto-inoculator. Pero pakita ko sa inyo kung paano mag-inoculate. Sabi, grabe ito, nakikipagtagisan sa akin ng pag-inoculate ang isang machine. Akala ko pa naman gandang-ganda ako sa pag-streak ko. Yun pa naman yung isa sa mga piniflex ko sa mga naging intern ko dati. Kasi sabihin nila, sir, ang ganda-ganda na isolate mo talaga si Staph aureus. So ako naman, laki-laki ng ko, namumula ang tenga ko sa sobrang proud ko. Tapos pala makikita ko meron na palang machine na nag-flex na mas magaling pa pala mag-inoculate sa akin. So I'll show you guys an automated inoculation system. This is this is from Biorad. I'm not sure if it's from Biorad. This is manual, all right? This is manual. The one on top is manual. That's me. That's what I usually do. And the one at the bottom is done by an automated streaker. BD Phoenix. Yeah, BD Phoenix, this one. BD is the one that has this an automated analyzer. Inocui. Okay? So, yun. This one, BD. Alright? So, ano pa ba? Ito ang niya. Ito maganda. This one. So, alam na ng may disposable inoculating loop siya, and then iikot lang siya dyan. Or i-streak niya depende sa configuration ninyo. And wala na kahit sino na lang ang gagawa ng trabaho natin. Kaya kailangan maaga na kayo magtapos ha. Pumasa na kaagad kayo ha. Para makagather na kayo ng experience, then fly na kayo sa ibang bansa. Iwan natin si Sir Marco. Charot! Kawawa naman si Sir Marco. Iniwan natin sa Pilipinas. Huwag ka mag-alala, Sir Marco. Padadalhan kita ng mga kung ano-ano mga baggage dyan. Every time na uuwi ako, promise yan. Pledge. 'Di ba? Anyway, let's move on to transport media for stool samples. So we're going to talk about transport media. Okay, so the most commonly used transport media, we have 3: Carrie Blair, Stewart, and buffered glycerol saline. Okay? So what about for normal examples of normal flora in the skin? I know it sounds a little bit random. Why is it random, sir? Because these are all what do you call this? These are all sorry, 1 and 2, Carrie, Blair, and Stewart are in the form of an agar-based media. Tube media siya. Buffered glycerol-saline is more on the wet one or the liquid version. So this one is semi-solid. These two, 1 and 2, buffered glycerol is so why did I ask a normal flora? So napaka-random naman, sir, ng next question. Kasi kapag ka nasama ninyo yung kapag ka hindi maganda yung pag-swab ng nurse or ng doctor, depende kasi kung sino. Usually kapag mga open wounds kasi, yung mga medtech hindi kumukuha ng sample. Usually ang kumukuha ng sample niyan is yung mga nurses or mga ano. So the reason why I ask this question is because some students, they still have no idea that these organisms can be isolated from the skin. Okay? Propionibacterium acnes, Micrococcus, diphtheria species, or the diphtheroids. We also have Staphylococcus species. Okay? So madami tayong na-isolate na organisms. So normal even transport media can cause you can obtain these organisms even if you're using transport media. So it doesn't mean that you're using transport media that automatically ang mapapatubo lang natin yung mga pathologic organisms. No. Okay? Now, what about the normal flora in the mouth? So yan yung mga pinag-usapan natin kanina. Last time. Streptococcus and coagulase negative Staph aureus. Why is it important that we remember coagulase negative Staph aureus? Ano ba pinagkaiba coagulase negative Staphylococcus pala, Staphylococci. Bakit? What's the difference? Majority of the pathologic organisms under the species of Staph falls under the coagulase positive one. Okay? Streptococcus, is it pathologic? No. Kapag ka nakasara yung bunganga mo whilst you're sleeping, that's the reason why you have bad breath. It's because of Streptococcus. Okay? So yun yung reason kung bakit ano. So sir, akala ko ba pag anaerobic hindi tutubo sa agar. Wait lang, chill ka lang. Alright? Meron tayong tinatawag na obligate at saka facultative. Okay? So siya is facultative anaerobe. Okay? Originally, it's anaerobe. Majority of the isolates that you would get would not survive aerobic conditions. However, they are facultative, which means that some of them can survive. Okay? So, wag piloso po ha. Wag lalapit sa akin. Sir, akala ko ba aerobic si Streptococcus? Gaganon sa akin. May mga tinatawag tayong facultative tsaka obligate. Pag sinabing obligate, pag sinakal ko si Nigel, matitegi siya kasi nga obligate aerobe siya. Okay? Ganun yung pinagkaiba nun. Pag facultative aerobe, bahala ka dyan, sir. I metabolize oxygen via photosynthesis. Sakalin mo lang ako, bahala ka sa buhay mo. 'Di ba? Ganon makasurvive si Nigel. 'Di ba? Pag sinabi mong ganon yung pinagkaiba ng obligate at saka ng facultative anaerobe. Imaginein mo lang sinakal ko si Nigel, obligate aerobe siya. Nategi siya. Okay? Si Clarice naman sinakal ko, facultative siya. Alright? Bahala ka, sakalin mo ko. Manggigil ka sa akin, sakalin ako, bahala ka, sir. Oh. Iba ang pag metabolize ko ng oxygen through lactic acid degradation ng pagano ko ng oxygen. Bahala ka dyan, sir. Sakalin mo lang ako, hindi ako matitegi. Yun ang facultative anaerobe. Okay? Ganun. Nagets yun ang pinagkaiba. Nagets yun ang analogy. Because sometimes, you gotta use weird analogies to help people understand a little bit better. Okay? So, yan. Alright, what about normal flora of the respiratory tract? So, the normal flora of the respiratory tract are as follows. Staphylococcus aureus, Staphylococcus epidermidis, Streptococcus pneumoniae, and Haemophilus influenzae. Sir, totoo ba na may Haemophilus influenzae? Yes. It's also possible to isolate Haemophilus influenzae there. But the main difference is where do you isolate it? Is it on an adult? Is it on a child? Or is it in an immunocompromised patient? That's the reason why you don't just release results in microbiology. Okay, I isolated these microorganisms. No, you have to write there, please correlate clinically. Okay? Because sometimes, especially for respiratory samples, actually the largest amount of headache I've gotten when I work in microbiology is for respiratory samples. Why? Because there's so many stuff that grows in the blood agar plates. Okay? What do I look for in blood agar plates? I look for the case first. Okay? I check out first if the case is a patient who is immunocompromised, a patient who has diabetes. Right? Patient has diabetes. Does the patient have is the patient an adult or an adult or a child or pediatric patient? Okay? So you got to know these things first. That's the reason why we discuss microorganisms pathology also, which is why it's important for you guys to not only understand the basics which is basically what I'm trying to help you guys out right now, as well as the pathogenesis related to each microorganism. Okay? Because this will serve as a key point or key reference when you are answering questions in your exams. Okay? So wag kakalimutan yung wag kakalimutan yung mga disease states. Bakit? Si Haemophilus influenzae. Pag nagkaroon ba ng Haemophilus influenzae si Nigel? Ilang taon ka na, Nigel?
22 po.
Okay, so pag naka-isolate ba ako ng Haemophilus influenzae sa'yo, i-report ko ba as clinically relevant?
No po.
Very good. See? That's the simple. You're not sure, ha? Hoy, confidence is key. sayang ang pag-lipstick at saka ang pag-contour na Nigel. Tigilan mo ako. Okay? What about Streptococcus pneumoniae? Na-isolate ko kay Maria Cristina kay Sabado. Clinically relevant na ba yon sa kanya? Ha? Clinically relevant na yon? Sino makakasagot? I-release ko na ba yon kaagad? Hindi din. Paano kung mayroon siyang pero paano for example, nagkaroon siya ng boyfriend na bisexual, naka-acquire siya ng HIV? I-report ba natin yon? Of course, di ba? Ganon. Okay? Alright? So, mga ganon. So, you gotta know the disease states, the pathologies in order. What about staph epidermidis? Sir, meron staph epidermidis sa nasal swab ko. Ganon. Sabi ko, ay, hala. Gaganon ako, bahala ka. Hala, matitiki ka na dyan. Gaganunin kita talaga pag tapos mag-worry. Meron akong intern dati, nag-worry talaga siya. kasi pinagamit ko siya ng machine, automated. Sir, I grew samples, Saudi, ibang lahi siya. Sir, the machine told me that there was a growth of staph epidermidis in my throat swab. Am I going to die? You know what I told her? Yes. And then she studied, I hate you, sir. I will kill you. Why? What happened? Why am I subject for homicide? Sabi niya ganun. Because staph epidermidis is a normal flora of your respiratory tract. Oh, why did you ask me? You're a medical technologist. You're studying clinical laboratory science. Why did you ask me? So ganun ako mang troll ng mga students. Hindi katulad sa inyo, mas malala sa inyo. 'Di ba? Kasi meron pang exam eh. What about the GIT? Ano yung GIT? Oh, tandaan mo, Nigel, yung igit. 'Di ba? GIT, doon yan sa bowels natin. Okay? So, GIT, ano yung mga normal flora? Mga anaerobic streptococcus, bacteroides, clostridium or clostridioides. Alright? Yun nga pala yung update ni Sir Marco natin nung isang time. Enterococcus species and the Ureabacterium. Eubacterium, not Ureabacterium. Okay? Anaerobic streptococcus, bacteroides, clostridium or clostridioides, enterococcus, and of course your fusobacterium. Enterococcus, maalala nyo siya mamaya. Pag-usapan natin when it comes to bile esculin. Alright? Now, normal flora in the vagina. In the vagina, don't forget your lactobacillus, staphylococcus aureus, and anaerobic gram-negative bacilli. Okay? Anaerobic gram-negative bacilli. For the male urethra, obviously the same things that you get on the skin. Okay? Staphylococcus species, Propionibacterium, diphtheria, and Micrococcus. What if I grow yeast in the vagina of a female? I'll ask a question. Vaginal swab. What if I was able to grow yeast in the patient sample? Is it pathologic or non-pathologic? Sige. What if there's yeast? Sige, magtatanong tayo randomly. Nakatingin lahat sila sa ano eh. Medyo umiiwas sila ng tingin sa webcam nila eh. Sige, magtatanong tayo ng random. Umiiwas ng tingin. Parang sa school din. Natutuwa ako. Pati din pala dito sa ano. Pati dito sa asynchronous ano ninyo. Lectures ninyo. Hindi kayo, parang ganun pa rin ang behavior ng mga students. Natutuwa ako. Parang gusto kong gawing research. Sige. I will ask Eliza. Women yung tatanungin ko. Yung mga boys mamaya na. Eliza, if I were to isolate Candida albicans from the vaginal swab of a female patient, would I consider it pathologic?
Yes po.
Yes? Really? Hindi pwedeng depends? Pwede depindi. Hindi pwedeng pwede depindi. Walang ganon.
Depende po.
Oh, yan. O sige. Sabi mo, nag-agree ka sa akin ng depende. O sige. Next question ko sa'yo. Bakit depende? Nakakainis ka, sir. I hate you so much na. Laging may ganun
Yun po
ako.
pala po yung sabi mo kanina. Depende po sa situation.
Okay.
Katulad,
Alright. Okay. I agree with you. Thank you so much. Now, follow-up question, Eliza. Hindi kita titigilan ngayon, Eliza. Para hindi mo makalimutan ng vaginal swabs. Suppose that the patient has diabetes mellitus. Is it relevant for the patient? Yes or no lang ang sagot. Yes or no. Don't worry.
yes.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. What about if I isolated it in her urine sample? Is it relevant also?
No.
Hi.
Ay, yes po.
Yes. Diabetes. Walang nagbago sa case. Sa wiwi lang nang galing, di ba? Ikaw talaga. Malay mo na sabit lang yung microorganism, di ba? O, di ba ganon? Di ba ganon ang critical thinking? We're using critical thinking, okay? We need you guys, when you're answering your questions, I want you to read the questions and I want you to have a critical thinking cap. Every time that you see questions, you need to have critical thinking. Because why? Baka mahilig si Sir Manuel ng mga palaisipan. Tandaan ninyo ha, pagka magsasagot kayo ng mga questions, tingnan nyo lang lagi yung dulo. Pag mga may words of wisdom sa dulo, ako yung gumawa nun, ha? Ako yung gumawa nun. Okay? So, very good. So, the vagina can have a plethora of microorganisms. It could be yeast. It could be, what about, okay. So, what about a patient seemingly normal, no temperature increases, there's no hyperthermia. I was able to isolate E. coli. The growth rate is moderate. So there's 3 types of growth rate. Scanty, moderate, and numerous or overgrown. There's moderate growth of E. coli in McConkey from a vaginal swab collected from a patient. Do you think it's pathologic? Yes or no? Nigel.
No po.
Very good. Why? Patient is not pregnant. The patient is not suffering from any symptomology of fever or anything. So obviously this patient doesn't have septicemia, right? Or any form of bacterial contamination. And why is there E. coli? Because the location of the vagina is near the gastrointestinal tract. Malay mo, hindi lang naghugas ng vilat. Okay? Diba? Ganon. Diba? Malay mo, hindi lang nag-pH care. Alright? Iniba ko para naman sumaya kayo. Basta pag may mga kabastusan talaga, itong mga student, nangingitian. Si Joe Hailey lang. Diba? Seryoso si Joe Hailey sa pag-aaral niya talaga. Ayoko na mga ganyang crap, sir. I am not accepting this. I am paying tuition fee to learn. Ganon. Kasi if I sound a little bit too garish with my jokes, that's the reason. The reason being is because I think that you guys are being too serious. Okay? I know, kailangan natin seryosohin, pero ngiti naman ng konti, guys. Kayo naman. 'Di ba? Ako lang to. Alright? So, normal transmission of normal flora and other opportunistic bacteria is done through the following. Okay? Transmission of normal flora and other opportunistic bacteria is done through the following method or sites of what do you call this? Infection. Ingestion, inhalation of airborne droplets, of course, sexual contact, zoonosis, vector-borne transfer, and skin penetration. Actually, for zoonosis and vector-borne transfer, it's basically skin penetration. But again, zoonosis can be ingestion of animal products. All right. Now, aseptic technique done at the extraction site for blood cultures. Always use 70% alcohol first, then iodine, and then alcohol. Then that's the time that you're going to extract. Also, please use sterile gloves. Okay? Please use sterile gloves. Why did I add this question? It sounds a little bit strange, sir. It sounds a little bit strange. Parang random lang siya. Because it was a question that was asked in a prior board, in a previous board exam. In the previous board exam. What is the method of asepsis? Or I think the question was how would you clean the site of collection for blood culture extraction? 'Di ba? Mga ganon. So based on my extensive research from review centers, majority of their answers is like this: 70% alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, by the way, and then iodine, isopropyl alcohol, and then extract. Okay? That's the time. And always don't forget to use sterile gloves. Okay? Sterile gloves. Marami akong nagkakaroon ng incident report ng mga nurses. Okay? Kawawa naman. Pag nabigyan kasi sila ng incident report, subject yun for non-increase renewal of contract. 'Di ba? I know, kaya medyo galit ang mga nurses sa mga medtech. Kasi nga, pag nakontaminate kasi nila yung blood culture bottle, there is a tendency that there is growth of microorganisms. And if the if the patient has undergone, especially for babies and patients in ICU, if the collection site wasn't cleaned properly, you might get the growth of Staphylococcus. I think that's the most common one. I think 99% of contaminants that I've worked whilst I was working in phlebotomy area in the wee young years of my career is always Staphylococcus, and majority of the time the nurses would collect and extract incorrectly, and one of the things that they would comment on is maybe that is pathologic, and then the doctor said, no, this is not pathologic. It's a normal skin flora. Malay mo hindi nakamask si nurse or si medtech na nag-extract. Tapos nagmamarites habang nag-extract ng baby. Na-contaminate ang blood culture bottle. Tumalsik ang laway doon sa site ng 'di ba? There's a lot of scenarios where contamination can occur. So please be mindful when you're collecting from patients, especially patients who are immunocompromised. You need to take into consideration their safety. Okay? So focus on what you're doing first and then finish afterwards. And then make gossip afterwards. Okay? All right? Pwede naman yun mangyari. Okay? So bakit? Kasi pwede ka mabigyan ng incident report kasi bibigyan ng gamot si patient. Why? Bakit? Within the first 24 hours, if there is growth, okay, you need to do gram stain. Okay? When you do gram stain, for example, Staphylococcus lugdunensis, all right, we're going to report it as a critical value because there's a result. Patient will be treated for broad spectrum antibiotics already. So, nasayang, 'di ba? And the patient was given unnecessary medication. Okay? So, if the patient was given unnecessary medication, that will fall into the patient who, if it was a mistake, we found out that the growth, because you can't find out immediately that it's a pathogen, right? It requires you like 48 hours to give a final result of the positive blood culture. Okay? So, you as a medtech need to understand the implications of the procedures that you're doing. Hindi din pwede yung baka nagplant ka ng nagdadaldal ka din. Okay? Huwag ganon. Yung nagpa-plant ka ng blood culture na positive. Kasi kukuha kayo ng sample. So it comes in the form of a bottle, right? So what you do is you extract a certain amount of the media, and then you plant it in, or you inoculate, sorry. Plant kasi ang terminology namin, eh. You inoculate it in three culture medias usually. If it came from an aerobic one, we don't add an anaerobic bottle. But if it came from an anaerobic culture bottle, we add an extra one for an extra blood agar plate for anaerobic culture. But usually it's three: blood, mac, and makonki. Okay? Blood, cap, and makonki. And for example, may tumubo. Hindi mo naman malalaman kaagad, 'di ba, na Staph aureus 'yan or Staph lugdunensis 'yan. Si doktor, nakita niya na, oy, may tumubo, bibigyan ko na ng antibiotic si patient. 'Di ba? Unnecessary. Paano kung contaminant siya, 'di ba? Kaya nagkakaroon ng incident reporting sa laboratory kasi may false positive tayo na ibibigay. Not meaning na false positive on our side, but false positive because of improper pre-analytic considerations. Okay? You understand? Okay? You understand? So next, anticoagulant used in blood culture bottles. Sir, meron palang anticoagulant ang mga blood culture bottles. Yes, we have what we call SPS. So what's SPS? What does SPS stand for? Dahil seryoso si Joe Hailey ang tatanungin ko. Si Joe Hailey ang pagtitipan ko ngayon. What's SPS? Anticoagulant. Sige. What's your answer? What is SPS?
Sodium polyanethol sulfonate po.
Okay, very good. Improper pronunciation in the middle portion, but okay. At least you know what it means. Sulfopolyanethol sulfonate. Okay, thank you so much. All right. Now, what is the action of the anticoagulant? The action of the anticoagulant is that it neutralizes the bactericidal effects of human serum. Okay, polyanethol sulfonate. It inhibits in vivo phagocytosis. So it inactivates the phagocytes, monocytes, and neutrophils, and it prevents the remaining what do you call this? Bactericidal ones. What are bactericidal components of the serum? Yung mga mga interferons, maybe there's antibodies, okay? Maybe complement also fixes initially, especially the third one, the third mechanism, which is the MBL complex. All right. Okay, so you need to neutralize these things, and sulfopolyanethol prevents these two things from happening. Okay. Why? Bakit? Kapag hindi natin na-inhibit, ano pa makukuha natin sa organism? Diba? Ay, sa blood, di ba? Ano pa makukuha? Kung na-phagocytize na lahat ng bacteria, ano na mangyayari, di ba? Now, when is it the best time to draw blood cultures? Sige nga. When is it the best time to draw blood cultures? Generally. Okay, generally. Eliza.
Kasagsagan po ng lagnat.
Okay, in English. In English. Kasagsagan ng lagnat. I love it. In English. English ang questions nyo, ha? Hoy, baka mamaya isulat mo, Eliza, kasagsagan ng lagnat. Hoy, hindi yun, multiple choice yun, ha? Baka meron tayong mga I know you know what's the English of it, but maybe meron tayong mga kaklase na hindi alam kung paano sasabihin sa Ingles ang kasagsagan ng lagnat. Ang lalim naman kasi, kahilera ng yung word na kasagsagan, salitahaan yan, te. Ano ba? O sige.
In the middle fever.
In the middle of fever? In the middle of fever? No. Okay,
In the
tama.
height.
At the height of fever. O, mali ang
At the height.
preposition. Mali ang preposition, ha? Humanda ka sa akin pag mag-IELTS ka na. Mali ang preposition. At the height of fever. Alright? Or, at the peak of the fever. Okay? So, mga ganon. Alright? At the height of a fever. Or we call it a fever spike. Okay, so there's 2 collections, not more than 3 in a 24-hour period. Okay? So 2 collections. So if you were interns, you could have experienced this. Who here will undergo? Sir Marco, you can type in the chat Are they going to rotate in the hospitals or virtual ano din to? Virtual internship din sila? I want to know.
After 6 months po.
After
First
6
six
months.
months po, first 6 months po, virtual internship.
Virtual. Ah, okay.
Tapos, yung second 6 months po, hospital internship na po.
Ah, okay. Ang sad naman. Wala talaga. Ay, oo nga pala. Nabanggit nyo na nga pala. No, kaya nga pala pababantayan ko sa iyo, Mark, si Minty. Oo nga pala. Oo. Kasi bawal. Hindi pwedeng magjowa muna si Minty. Kailangan mag-aral muna siya. Oo. Kawawa naman. Wala man lang magkakaroon ng internship syndrome, yung internship love life, yung naghiwalay dahil sa naghiwalay ang magjowa dahil sa internship. Walang ganon. 'Di ba? Sayang. Sayang naman. Hindi nyo na-experience yung the joys and the heartaches of being an intern. Hindi ako ganun kasi mabait ako nung estudyante ako. Dito lang ako naging barubal nung namunta na ako ng ibang bansa. Dati ako school, hospital, and then home. O, 'di ba? Tapos maglalaro lang ng Ragnarok, 'di ba? Ganon. Mabait ako nung bata ako eh. Ngayon naging demonyo na ako eh. Alright? Now, let's move on to your next question. Collection of blood specimens for culture is ideally extracted prior to antibiotic treatment. However, in patients who have taken antibiotics before collection, what special indication is followed? That one is important. Alright, this one is important. Please remember, please put a star on this one. I think I added it I think 2 years ago because it was asked in the question. It was asked in the BOC test bank. BOC is Board of Certification for AACP, for those people who are taking AACP. Okay? So, what is the special indication for patients who are taking antibiotics? So, sometimes it cannot be avoided. Sometimes patients are taking antibiotics, right? Sometimes you can't predict what the patient has been doing prior to blood extraction. So, what do? We collect blood culture bottles with ARD, or antimicrobial removing device. Okay? This prevents penicillinase, magnesium sulfate, and aminobenzaldehyde. Okay? Specifically used for these three antibiotics. Okay? Penicillin, tetracycline, and sulfonamides. Okay? So you need to use containers that have penicillinase, magnesium sulfate, and para-aminobenzaldehyde. That's why in some institutions it's part of their policy. It's part of their policy to indicate whether the patient is taking antibiotics. It's a prerogative. Why? Because there might be misdiagnoses. Okay, patient may be suffering from septicemia, but because it was collected at the time at which the patient just started an IV drip of an antimicrobial such as penicillin, the doctors might have missed it, and it could have killed the patient, or might have killed the patient, or it caused a near miss. Okay, so we need to be mindful of these things. Okay, some hospitals, okay, I think in my previous hospital, it's imperative that that doctors write the history. Okay, and it's also imperative for medical technologists or laboratory technicians to look at the history prior to reporting blood culture results. Why? Because you have to indicate there, please submit a sample confirmed with anti-penicillinase, depending on the antibiotic that the patient is taking. Okay, so in my previous hospital, we always do it. We weren't lax when it comes to microbiology tests or analysis. Okay, so how much blood is extracted in culture? So I had depends on the actually it depends. Actually, I didn't want to add this one. I wanted to remove it because it depends on the manufacturer. But this is from BD. BD is the leading source of. I'm not. BD hasn't paid me to tell you this in this lecture, but they are the leading source of blood culture bottles in, I think, in the Philippines as well as in Middle Eastern countries. So suffice it to say, it's relevant here in this discussion. Ideally, it's 10 ml, okay, and for children, it's 1 ml to 1 ml to 5 ml. Okay, small yan na, hindi yan megaliter sa small m lang yan. Okay, so 1 ml ideally, for 1 ml to 5 ml for infants, and ideally 1.5 ml, 10 ml for adults. Okay, now dilution of blood in broth media. So, kailan ba tayo kumukuha ng broth media or blood? Yung mga patients with brucellosis, with suspected of brucellosis, Brucella abortus, Brucella melitensis, okay? So, you need to dilute broth sample with blood. Okay? So, the ideal dilution is 1:10. Alright? Ideal dilution is 1:10. Signs of bacterial growth in blood culture. This is the traditional way of, if you don't have the BacTech or BactiAlert. BactiAlert systems are automated blood culture bottle analyzers. Traditionally, they use these 4 cardinal signs in determining if the sample is blood culture positive or not. So please remember that in the Philippines, you might be asked these questions. Or if they updated the questions, or you're taking the exams for other tests, you need to listen in on my updated lecture on automation. Okay, so for traditional ways of looking for bacterial growth in blood culture, you have 4 signs, 4 cardinal signs. You need to look for clot formation. Is there hemolysis? Is there turbidity? And lastly, if there is bubble formation. Okay? So these are the cardinal signs of blood culture positive blood bags or blood culture positive results. Traditionally, okay? Traditionally. Nowadays, we're using laser technology to measure CO2 changes in the blood culture bottles. Okay? So I'll show you guys a blood culture bottle from BD. Okay, so I think this is the one that we use in the hospital now. Yeah, this one. All right. So yeah, can you guys see it? This one. Hindi yan gin bulag ha. Huwag kayong
Yes, sir.
ano ha. Huwag ka, Mark ha. Huwag kang ano ha. Hindi yan gin bulag.
Na-
Okay?
Naisip ko nga po yung mga
Parang ano siya no, parang
short
shot glass. Ay parang mga ano ng gin. Brand.
airplane po.
Oo. Oo, yung sa airplane, yung alak sa airplane. Pero yeah, it's almost at the same size. But yeah, they look like this. And at the bottom part, there's an indicator there. Okay, that indicator changes if there is bacterial growth. If there's no changes, then there's nothing to report. Okay, so when it changes, what happens ba kasi when there's bacterial growth? This is a broth media. Each of it is different depending on use. The ones that we use in the laboratory, in my laboratory, is the blue one. Or in our laboratory, hindi pala ako ang may-ari ng laboratory. In our laboratory, we use the blue one, the red one, and the yellow one. The yellow one is for pediatric patients. The blue one is for adult patients, anaerobic culture. The pink one is anaerobic adult cultures. So we have 3. The other ones is I think for mycobacteria. The other one is for Brucella. The other one is I think anaerobic fastidious organisms. This is the only ones that we use. The only 3, because we can still isolate fastidious organisms. That's the explanation that my head microbiologist told me. So there's going to be changes. So for example, the broth is full of nutrients, as I mentioned before. Culture media has nutrients, right? And when there is culture media, when there is metabolism of these nutrients, what will happen? There will be a release of byproducts, di ba? So for example, sinakal ko si Nigel, wala namang mangyayari doon sa may ano, di ba? Pero for example, sinakal ko si Clarice, di ba? Facultative siya, di ba? So, ang mangyayari is magme-metabolize siya. So for example, kumakain si Nigel at saka bacteria si Nigel at saka si Clarice, 'di ba? So nasa loob sila ng mga culture bottle na 'yan. Alright? Anong nangyayari kapag kumakain ka? Anong end product kapag kumakain ka? Yes, Nigel, alam ko na kung anong sasabihin mo, mag-iigit ka, 'di ba? Yes, correct. 'Di ba? So yun yung nangyayari. What happens is there's a change in the solution. What happens is there's a change. And if there's a lot of change in that solution, that will indicate how fast your blood culture bottle will test positive. Okay? And mag-change din yung color. Alright? So it could be a change in the pH depending on the manufacturer. Okay? So some manufacturers, they other than BD Bactec, they measure it based on the CO2 levels, or they call it the change in pH. Sometimes it could be change in the optical density of the indicator pellets, or it could be a change in the flocculation on the sample itself. So it could be different. It could be different. It could be. It could be. There's a wide variety of assays that could be done here, or methodologies in which they could report your result as a positive. So be mindful that the one that I'm showing you is more or less has something to do with CO2 changes. Okay? And I'll don't worry, there is a specific lecture for that one. I just wanted you guys to see it because you guys will take at least 6 months before you go back to before you go to the hospital. So at least you have an idea what to do when you're in the hospital. Okay? So how long should blood cultures be maintained for growth? For routine purposes, it's around 7 days. Okay? You need to have a report within 24 hours or 48 hours depending on the institution policy. Okay? Depending on the institution's policy. So in our hospital, it's around 48 hours. Okay? In previous hospital, I think when I was in the Philippines, it was a 24-hour result. You need to have a 24-hour initial result and then another 48 hours because we're using manual before when I was there in the Philippines. And then for my first job here, it's strictly at 32 hours. No, so it depends on the policies and procedures of the hospital. But maintaining how long the blood culture is universal. Okay? So 7 days for routine purposes. For brucella or for brucellosis, it's 21 days. Okay? For brucellosis, it's 21 days. As I mentioned before, I think 7, 14, 21. Yeah. Yeah, that's 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Okay? And then for leptospira, it's around 6 to 8 weeks. Sir, ginagawan din ng blood culture ang leptospira? Yes! Yes, Nigel. Huwag kang mag-alala. Nigel, ha? Ginagawan din ng blood culture ang leptospira. Okay? Yung itsura ni Nigel, gumanon kasi siya. Hindi ko alam kung dahil doon sa pinapanood niya or dahil sa lecture namin. And I know some of you are watching Netflix. It's okay. Actually, right now, my plan is whilst I'm discussing, I'm going to play a game whilst I'm discussing. But baka mamaya kasi mag-alt tab ako, biglang lumabas doon sa share screen ko yung nilalaro ko. Kaya nakakaano. 'Di ba? So don't worry. Recorded naman siya, 'di ba? The joys of living in this particular time, 'di ba naman? 'Di ba? Living in this generation. At least recorded siya. You can watch it and you can add data to Sir Marcos to me and Sir Marcos. I think we would call it a mini research kung kailan nagka-cram yung mga students. Okay? So yan. Okay? So yeah, that's 7 days. Number 1 is 7 days. 3 to 4 weeks or 21 days for brucellosis. Leptospira is at around 6 to 8 weeks. Okay? So clear? Can we move on? All right, so these are the answers to your question. In the books, it's 3 to 4 weeks. Some questions, they would ask 21 days. Okay? So please add here 21 or /21 days. Okay? Now, the most abundant normal flora in that can be expected or that you would expect from a throat swab is of course alpha hemolytic streptococcus. What's the difference between alpha hemolytic and beta hemolytic? Arnie. Nagulat si Arnie. Sir? Ano? Ba't ako? Sige, Arnie. What's the difference between alpha hemolytic and beta hemolytic? This is must know, okay? This is must know.
Sir, yung beta hemolytic po, breakdown na sa red blood cell and hemoglobin.
And
Yung alpha po is partial lang.
All right. At least we have basic understanding of at least we have a basic understanding of the foundations of microbiology. Thank you so much. Because malapit na tayo mag-discuss about staph and strep and that's very important in our discussion. So, thank you, Arnie. So, for pathogens, you're going to look at beta hemolytic strep and, of course, or what you call Streptococcus pyogenes. Okay? Now, what media should be used when you're going to get nasopharyngeal or throat swabs that are used in that are used in microbiology. Okay, so there's different throat swabs. For viral culture, it's different as well, or nasopharyngeal swabs. Okay, for microbiology, we're talking about microbiology. Okay, we're talking about microbiology. We just want to clear that out for you. What media is used for nasopharyngeal or throat swabs when expecting to observe beta streptococcus in the fluorescence microscope, or in a fluorescence microscope? You need to use Todd Hewitt broth, okay, or the TD broth, Todd Hewitt broth, okay. Next, most common pathogen expected in nasopharyngeal swabs, of course, is your Haemophilus influenzae, Bordetella pertussis, and Neisseria meningitidis. Sir, akala ko CSF lang ang pinanggagalingan ng Neisseria meningitidis. Alam ko, nagulat ka din, Clarice. Clarice, di ba? Kasi meningitis, tapos sa may ano, but the most common way of isolating this organism is through a nasal swab. Yes. Bakit? Paano ba natatransmit ang meningococcus? Or the causative agent of meningococcemia? Through inhalation. Okay? And they actually go, and if you look at the pathology of, or sorry, the pathogenesis of meningococcemia, is this microorganism goes from the nasal cavity direct and makes its way through our brains via that portal of entry. So be mindful of these organisms. Okay? So ano ba yung Bordetella pertussis? Sir, meron pa bang nadadiagnose with Bordetella pertussis? You'd be surprised. In the Philippines, we were still able to isolate it from a patient who is suffering from cough that is persistent for almost, I think, 2 months already from a baby. So yun yung tinatawag nating whooping cough, di ba? Pertussis is known as whooping cough or the 100-day cough. Diba? Hindi ko kaya yun. 100 araw akong inuubo. Hindi ko kaya yun. Isang araw nga lang, naluloka na ako eh. Diyos ko. Diba? Diba, Clarice? Tapos sasakalin pa kita. Mag-photosynthesis na lang ako, sir. Diba? Ganun. Alright? So, the most common method of collecting sputum specimens. Sino makakasagot nito sa akin? Sige. Sputum specimens. The most common method. Deep. Hoy, may mga bastos. Humingisi ka, Mark Segi. Bastos ka ni Mark Segi, ha? Hay. Ikaw din, Arnie, ha? Arnie, ba't ganyan kayo? Ano? Sino yung nagsagot? Sino yung sasagot? Unmute. Eliza.
Deep cough.
Bakit tumatawa si Arnie at saka si Mark Segi? Hoy! Hoy! This is a child-friendly lecture. Nakakaloka kayo, dalawang lalaki kayo, ha? Hoy! Ganun, ha? Alright, so deep cough. Yes, deep cough. So the first thing that the patient is the first thing that the medtech should do before performing any staining technique or culture is, of course, you need to examine the wet mount first. Bakit? Ano bang kailangan natin tingnan? Bakit kailangan natin mag-wet mount? Ano ba yan, sir? Bakit lahat ng mga words mo, mga vocabulary words mo hindi maganda? Alright? So, sige. Who can answer? Why do you need to look at the sputum in a wet mount before doing anything or performing any tests? Sige. Tingin tayo, sino pa ba mga nandito? Parang mayroon pa ako. What about Amanda? Amanda is growing on me na eh. Amanda, are you still there? Ay, wala na.
Yes po, sir.
Amanda.
Ay, sir, buhay pa po. Ay, nandito pa po.
I love it. Buhay pa. I love it. Akala ko sinakal ka ng kasama mo dyan. Tapos tiningnan niya din kung ano ka. Tiningnan niya din kung facultative aerob ka. Alright. So, bakit kailangan natin tingnan ang ano? Bakit kailangan natin tingnan sa wet mount ang sputum sample? Sige. Hoy, Mark, wag magtatanong sa likod. Nagtatanong ka sa likod ng sagot. Sige, Amanda.
Pass po muna, sir.
Pass po muna. Or sige, magtatanong pa ako isa pa. Ay, tatanong ko pa lang si Nigel. Tatanungin ko pa lang sana.
Bawi po ako.
Sige, tulungan
Bawi
mo,
ako
Nigel.
later, sir.
Don't worry. It doesn't matter. Wrong answer or no answer, it's fine with me. We're here to learn. All right, Nigel. Bruha,
Nagahangin po.
naka-mute ka. Bruha, naka-mute ka. Oh, ayan. Naka-mute ka na naman. Ano ba talaga, girl? Napapagod na ako sa'yo. Nigel, napapagod na ako sa'yo. I-type mo na nga lang, Nigel. Napapagod na kami sa'yo. Lalo na tatawa pa ng tawa yung dalawang lalaki dun sa deep. Busy talaga tong dalawang lalaki na to. Naloka ako sa inyo. Kayo, ha? Sige. Nigel, ano na? Ang tagal? Ang tagal ba ng pressure? May pressure. Ay, nako. Ay, Nigel. Parang kailangan mo mag-send sa akin ng 100 Gcash. Baliktad. Baliktad. Ano na? Sir, sort nagahang. Sorry, nagahang ang phone. Oh, sige, iba na lang. Sige, si Clarice. Clarice, do you know the answer? Nagulat din si Clarice. Oh. Oh, sige, Clarice, sorry. Iba na lang kasi may nagpresenta. Sige, may bida-bida. Sige, Miss Sabado. Bida ang saya. O sige. Nasaan na si Mac? Alam, nagtampo si Mac.
Sir, to observe, kung may mga lumalangoy ba doon na organism?
Hoy! Kayo, hoy! Hindi ganon! Ano may lumalangoy? Ano may lumalangoy? Natawa na naman si Arnie at saka si Mark. Ano ba yan? Nigel, sige, Nigel. Nigel na, walang picture, sige. O sige. Bakit wala ko naririnig, Nigel? Si James Paul na lang. Wala talaga, fail talaga, Nigel.
Sir, to check for contaminations kung may mga squamous cells po.
Okay, so what's the relevance of squamous cell, James? Patay, nakalimutan na. Tama naman yung sagot ni Nigel, epithelial cells po and WBCs. Yes, that's correct. But what's the relevance of epithelial cells and WBCs? That's the question. Okay, sirit na. Walang gusto manalo ng 100? Walang gusto manalo ng 100? O sige na, sirit na. Ay, si James Paul daw. Sige, James Paul. Give it the college try. Ko dami ko ng utang nito kay James Paul. Ano po? Ano, James Paul? Nag-mute ka kanina.
Pwede pong mag-interfere po sa microscopic po.
Sorry, no. Thank you for participating. Akala ko madadagdagan ng utang ko kay James Paul. O sige, who else? Who else knows? Hindi yung mga lumalangoy, ha, Maria Sabado? Nakakaloka ka, Maria Sabado. Ano yung mga, sa libro yung mga binabasa mo? Nakakaloka ka. O sige, Eliza. What about Eliza? Eliza, do you know the reason why it's important for us to observe epithelial cells and WBCs?
Pass po.
Okay, so wala na? Alright, 10, 9. Oh, meron pa si Arnie daw. Si Arnie, walang kabastusan, ha?
Sir, tatry ko lang.
Arnie, walang kabastusan, please!
Sir, try lang po.
Sige.
For diagnosing po ng bacterial pneumonia.
No, sorry. That's too much. That's going through, ano na. Nag-analyze ka na eh. Nag-analyze ka na ng sample eh. We're doing pre-analysis first. But that's okay. That's partly correct, but advance ka mag-isip, kumbaga. Alright, so, wala na? 5, 10. 5, 10 tuloy. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, ito na, sasabihin ko na. Aamin na ako. Para ma-differentiate. Huli ka na, te. Diyos ko. Na-stress kami sa'yo. Okay? So, wala akong mababayaran ng ano, wala akong may crash price ngayon. My God, buti na lang. Survive ako kay James Paul kanina. Medyo kinakabahan ako kay James Paul pagka nagre-raise ng hand eh. Alright, so tama naman si Nigel, pero kulang. Again, I need the specifics. So, it's used to differentiate sputum from saliva. Okay? 'Di ba? Gets nyo? Bakit? Saan ba mas madami ang sputum? Ano ba mas marami sa sputum? WBCs or epithelial cells? Nakalimutan na nila ang analysis of the urine and bodily fluids. Nigel, wala tong 100 ha. WBCs. WBCs, yes, is correct. Sa epithelial cells, di ba yung pag nag-cheek swab kayo? Di ba? Ay, hindi nyo pala ako nakikita. Hindi nyo pala ako nakikita kapag nag-cheek swab kayo, di ba? Andun yun sa may laway ninyo, kasama dun sa laway nyo yun. Or yung simpleng pagdura sa slide, yung mga experiment natin sa Biology 1, may makikita kayo mga may makikita kayong mga epithelial cells. Okay, so pag nag-cheek swab kayo, ganun, no, di ba? Ang arte ko mag-cheek swab, nakataas pa yung pinky finger. Ang arte, di ba? Ganun. Ganun dapat din kayo ka-arte. Okay? So, yan. Classification used to done is what we call the Bartlett's classification. Okay? So how is this done? If you have less than 10 epithelial cells present in the sample, that's basically a saliva sample. Or sorry, greater than dapat to ha. Greater than 10 epithelial cells, that's saliva. Greater than 10 polymorphonuclear cells or WBCs. Greater than 25 polymorphonuclear cells, that's sputum. Baliktad tong isa ha, sorry. Edit ko to pag na-receive niyo yung bago yung sample. But for today's lecture, because we're recording, please change this to greater than. Okay? Di pa na-edit ng secretary ko. Alright, so methods used in collecting urine samples for microbiology tests. Sige nga. Tingnan natin kung naalala nyo pa yung tatlong methods. Analysis of urine and bodily fluids. Pwedeng itanong dito, pwedeng itanong sa AUBOF ninyo. Sige. Isa-isahin natin ang mga students. Sige nga. Sige, Nigel. Alam ko kating-kati ka na magbida-bida. Sige. What is the method of...
First morning.
Bro,
Midstream clean catch.
Okay. Tama na. Buti sinabi mo yung midstream clean catch. Buti na lang. Alright. First morning. Hoy, anong kinalaman ng first morning sa ano? Gulat ako sa iyo ha. Alright. What about the other two? There's other two methods of collecting it. Analysis of urine and bodily fluids. Question yan. Ira Joy Bautista. Oh my God, Ira, your name is one of my best friends. You're named after one of my best friends. So kailangan makasagot ka dito ha. Okay. Ira, sige. Ira Joy.
Sir, ano po, 24 hours.
Sandali, nasaan ka? Hindi ka nagpakita. Sabi ko pag sasagot, magpapakita. Ayan. O, naka-face mask. Bakit
Sir,
naka-face
ito
mask?
po.
Bakit naka-face mask ka, te?
Sir, galing po sa work.
Okay. I love it. Working student. Yeah, girl, work. Alright. So, Ira Joy Bautista said, what's the other one?
24-hour urine, sir.
Bruha. Hindi clinical chemistry itong Hoy, nasa microbiology tayo.
Sorry, sir.
Nakakaloka ka. Mark Segi.
Sir, alam ko rin yung nasa CC. random urine.
Eliza. Kaya pala hindi na siya nagsalita. Alright, Eliza.
Ano po? Catheterization.
Okay. Para meron pang iba. Sige, iba pa. Sige, go. Sige pa, ano pa? Isa pa. Gagamit ka ng
Nakalimutan ko
syringe
po yung last part, pero
Gagamit ka ng syringe dito. Tama! Very good! And that is how you answer a question! I love it! Very good. Very good. Wait, let me just close the door kasi nagtitinginan yung mga kasama ko sa kabilang bahay. My God. Sabi nila, ano nangyari dito? Bakit tumatawa? Bakit nag-aano to si sir? Okay? So yes, that's correct. Suprapubic aspiration. Very good. Okay? So these are your... Hoy ha! Ira ha? Pangalan mo pa naman ang best friend ko, Ira ha? Ikaw ha? Midstream clean catch, Ira ha? Catheterization and suprapubic aspiration. Yung 24-hour urine collection na yun ay for CMCC. Creatinine clearance yon or ano pa ba? 24-hour urine protein albumin ratio, yung mga ganon, ha? Chillax lang kayo, ha? Bukas pa yung clinical chemistry nyo. Hoy, huwag yung pinaghahalo-halo. Ha? Nako, ano bang ginawa ni Ma'am Judea sa inyo? Bakit hanggang ngayon na memorize kayo talaga, ha? Microbiology tayo, ha? Chillax. Alright? Next. Alright, next. The preservative used for urine samples for microbiology tests is of course boric acid. Don't forget boric acid. Okay? Why? Because it prevents the death of microorganisms. Okay? That's simple. That's simple as that. Urinary tract infections, when how many colony forming units are reported, greater than 100 CFU. What media is used to count the colonies and in what streaking pattern is used. Okay? So what media do we use when counting? Sige. What media do we use when counting colonies? Para makuha natin yung greater than 100 CFU. What is CFU ba, sir? Colony forming units. Okay? So, wag kayong malito. So, anong media ginagamit natin? Bigyan ko kayong choices. Gusto nyo? Sige. BAP, CAP, Makongki, and CLED. Sige nga, tingnan natin kung memorize ng mga students. Naalala nila from their previous professors. BAP, according to Eliza. Okay? So, we'll come back to that. Okay? Sige. Si Eliza lang ang student namin. Mr. Marco. Walang gustong sumagot. Wala namang problema kung magkamali. Mas gusto ko nga nagkakamali kayo ngayon pa lang dito. Kayo talaga CLED daw according to Mark Segi. Sige. Kino-contest ni Mark Segi ang credibility ni Eliza. Sige. Nakakaramdam ako ng tension. Sige. I don't know whether it is academic tension or sexual tension. I do not know. Maybe, whatever. We don't care. All right? Silang dalawa lang ang estudyante natin. Nasaan na ang mga students ko na si Arnie din natawa ng tawa kanina nung sinabi yung word na deep. Sandali, James Paul, chill ka lang. Sa chat box tayo magsasagot. CLED daw according to Maria K. Sabado. Okay. Nakakaramdam talaga ako ng tension. I am feeling this is a love triangle already. Nagkakampihan yung dalawang tao. Kailangan dumagdag kayo. Please lang. Para hindi ko maramdaman ang tension. Please lang. Ha? Hoy, bilisan nyo magdagdag. Ayoko ng awkwardness ng tension na to. Okay. CLED po talaga. O talaga, galit na galit talaga. For counting ha, for counting. Remember, talking about counting. Counting. Okay? CLED media. CLED. According to people, CLED daw talaga. CLED daw talaga. Sige. CLED. Puro CLED ang mga tao. Sige, CLED media. Sige, sino pa? Magbigay pa ako ng 30 seconds. According to Rizalyn Gaspar, CLED. Bakit CLED ang sinagot mo, Rizalyn Gaspar? Okay? Sige. Okay. Wala nang sasagot. Alright. Everybody is correct. Even the one who answered BAP. Okay? Even the one who answered BAP is correct. The only difference between CLED is that it allows better separation. Okay? It allows better separation. Everybody is correct. Talaga, bakit sir, ang daming palaisipan? Naiinis kami sa'yo. Ang daming palaisipan. Minsan ang sagot, isa lang. Minsan ang sagot, yes or no. Minsan ang sagot, may follow-up question. Kasi nga, gusto kong i-activate ang inyong critical thinking skills. Okay? So here, we're using blood and blood and CLED medium. Okay? Ay! Lunch break na pala. Wait, tatapusin ko lang tong last few slides natin. Okay? Mag-lunch break. Nag-alarm na siya. So, yeah. So, the only difference between the two is that CLED media is better whenever you get something that is swarming or you can isolate the organisms better. So, ano ba yung mga organisms na nag-isolate? Proteus, di ba? So, be mindful of these things. Okay? So, we use, actually, kahit nga in the laboratory, kahit nga hindi siya urine sample, kapag kahirap na hirap talaga akong i-isolate, lalo na kapag ka Proteus ang tumubo, kasi talagang notoriously annoying talaga si Proteus. Talagang nilalagay ko siya sa CLED para humiwalay talaga siya. Kasi nahihirapan akong gumawa ng cell suspension na bacterial suspension kapag ka may Proteus. So ginagawa ko talaga, bahala ka diyan. Ipaplant kita sa CLED. Ganun. Alright, so what does CLED stand for? It stands for cysteine lactose electrolyte deficient agar. Okay? So cysteine lactose electrolyte deficient agar. Okay? So yun. Alright, now the pattern that you're going to use is a simple streak pattern or a T streak. Okay? So T streak is basically you just make a T and then you just wipe the not wipe the agar, wipe the loop. Streak the loop like this. Hang on a sec. Where's paint? Kita niyo yung paint?
Yes, sir.
All right. So paint, I'm going to go like this. Let's color it with, sorry. Ito na naman tayo. Hindi marunong gumamit ng paint si Sir Manuel. Wisit talaga. Hindi marunong gumamit ng paint. Okay? So for example, ganito kasi color ng CLED, di ba? Okay? So, pag simple streak pattern is you're going to make a T. Go here. Oops. Go here. And then, what you're gonna do is, you're going to go back. Mas maganda yan kapag ka nasa actual. Pero, basically, it's like that. Bakit siya T? Kasi nga, gumawa ka ng T. Diba? Okay? So, pag ganun siya. Okay? So, ganun yung pag-streak. Sorry yung lumagpas. Hindi ako lumaki na merong coloring book. Lumalampas ako pag nagko-color ako. Sorry naman. So, T pattern siya. Okay? Alright. So, what else are we going to talk about? Next one is about, CFU is greater than 100. UTI is diagnosed if there's greater than 100. But there might be false results. So, be mindful of the false results, like long-standing urine samples. Okay? So, be careful with reporting. Now, the most common cause of UTI, according to the World Health Organization. Sige. Mabilisan lang to. Bibigyan ko kayo ng characteristics niya. Gram neg bacilli, imvic positive, negative. Ano pa? Purple to pink colonies in McConkey. What else pa? Organism that grows a greenish metallic sheen on EMB, eosine methylene blue. Ano na yung sagot dyan? Kayo talaga, pag binigyan ko, yan na, naglabasan na mga tao. Yay! Woo! Galing, buti naman. Akala ko magbibigay pa ako ng baka mamaya gusto nyo charades pa. 2 words. Di ba? Gusto nyo ganun pa yung mga itsura. 2 words. Starts with letter E. May mga ganun pa. Hoy, hindi ganun sa exam, ha? Ganyan ang clues. Dapat dito kayo matututo sa clues na nandito, yung green, gram neg, imbic, positive, negative. Ganun dapat yung tatandaan yung clues. Hindi yung 2 words. Starts with letter E. Ends with letter I. Walang ganon, ha? Huwag kayong ganon. Please lang. Huwag kayong basanay sa ganon. Okay? So, it's about 90% of cases from urine sample. 90% of cases actually, even in our hospital, when I do an antibiogram, 90% of the E. coli cases comes from urine samples. Okay? Very rarely do we find staph species in urine, but still we can still isolate some of them. Now, cerebrospinal fluid. We're going to go back to cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid should be examined within how many hours after being received in the laboratory? Okay nga, within 1 hour. All right. CSF smears should be culture. CSF smears and culture samples should come from where? A centrifuged sample or what you call a CSF pellet. Okay? Hindi pwede yung parang ginawa mo lang siyang urine ha. Pag ganun, Nigel ha. Yung ilulublog mo lang yung inoculating loop dun sa may container tapos yun na hindi. Kailangan i-centrifuge mo, Nigel. Ha? Sasakalin kita, Nigel, kapag ganun ang ginawa mo. Ha? Kasi sir, sabi mo kapag ka hoy, CSF yon. Okay? CSF ang pinag-uusapan. Inimitate ko lang yung boses mo pero hindi yun talaga ang boses mo. Char ko lang yun. Okay? Alright? Next. Next is the most common pathogen isolated in the CSF. Actually, it's rarely isolated. In fact, in my 8 years of working in clinical microbiology or in the clinical laboratory in general, I've only experienced one organism that grew in the CSF of a patient. It's from a baby, and it's actually which one do you think it is? Haemophilus influenzae, Neisseria meningitidis, or pneumoniae? Of course, it's number 3, Streptococcus pneumoniae. Okay? That's the only time I saw something grow, or I was able to isolate something from the CSF of a patient. Very rarely do I see meningitidis. Why? When you see it in the CSF, you have to report it via you would have heard it from the news. Kasi magsasabi mo, magsasabi, hindi naman mag-hoy ang mga newspaper stands. Sabihin lang nila merong outbreak ng meningococcemia, 'di ba? Napakalaking issue sa Pilipinas 'yun kapag may mga ganun na mga pangyayari. Okay? Now, bacterial meningitis based on groups is actually if it's a 1-year-old patient, Haemophilus influenza, 1-month-old to 5 years old, it's for Haemophilus influenzae. For 5 years old to an adult, it's Neisseria meningitidis, and Streptococcus pneumoniae is for somebody who is greater than 29 years old. But as I mentioned before, depends on the case. So in my case, it was a baby, as I've said earlier, and it was from I think it was he got it from, or the baby got it from an older gentleman, and that's basically it. And lastly is Listeria monocytogenes. Listeria monocytogenes, you have to remember, it's for all ages. But specifics is that it's from an immunocompromised patient. Okay? Newborns, don't forget, I forgot to mention, newborns, please don't forget Streptococcus agalactiae and gram-negative bacilli. I think that is the end of our discussion about infection control and specimen handling, as well as normal flora. Your lectures, meron pa akong isa. Thank you for listening. Microbiology series will be posted in your in my YouTube channel. This is the link, by the way. O, diba? Talagang prepared. And that is my picture when I was a little bit younger, 1 year ago. All right? So, I'm going to give you guys like a 10-minute break because girl needs to eat also. Okay? We're going to move on with the specifics of microbiology. Okay? We're going to move on with the specifics, specific microorganisms this time. All right? So I want you to listen attentively because majority of the questions that will come from me will be related to what we're going to discuss next. Most of the things that I mentioned in our previous 3 lectures, 3 na ba ang lectures natin, Mark? In our previous 3 lectures, this is basically just 4. These are just scraping off the edge of what you need to remember in microbiology. So connect the dots ko lang kasi you are coming into this discussion with the assumption na meron ka ng background information. Parang nagre-review lang tayo, di ba? Gets nyo? Kaya kung meron man ako mga connection from previous lectures na uulitin ko din, this is the time. Okay? Alright? Okay ba? So prepare na kayo because now we're going to look into the wonderful world of microorganisms, specifically bacteria. Okay? So, I'll give you guys 10 minutes. I'll be back in 11:05 here in this country. I think there in the Philippines, I don't know what it is. It's I think 4:05 in the Philippines, and we're going to tackle the first set of microorganisms that we will discuss. And yeah, okay.